Chapter 211. Chu Xiu's sudden words stunned Zhang Bing. She asked with a puzzled expression, "What do you mean, young master? What did I see?" Chu Xiu smiled and pointed at his chest. There was the mark of the Guanzhong torture room there. It was so inconspicuous that ordinary people would not be able to notice it. Chu Xiu said calmly, "The Guanzhong torture room has always kept a low profile in the outside world. It only manages its own territory. Most people in the pugilistic world do not have much of an impression of the Guanzhong torture room. They have heard of it, but they have never seen it. But Miss Zhang is very smart. You must have recognized my identity, right? This thing is so precious. Now that I have taken it away, Miss Zhang must be very unhappy, right? So Miss Zhang is preparing to leave first, then tell the hidden sword villa about me, and then instigate them to attack me. Yes, no, yes." When he said the last three words, the smile on Chu Xiu's face had completely disappeared. He became extremely gloomy. Zhang Bing's expression suddenly changed. She said with a pale face, "I didn't. Young master, please don't misunderstand. I am a weak woman who has never even left Eastern Qi. How would I know what the mark of the Guanzhong torture room looks like?" Chu Xiu said expressionlessly, "Didn't I just say that you recognized the mark on my body and confirmed that I am from the Guanzhong torture room? You confessed without being pressed. Besides, it's useless even if you didn't, because I have already told you my identity. Miss Zhang, haven't you heard of killing people to keep them quiet?" Just as Chu Xiu finished speaking, Zhang Chuhan suddenly shouted in a stern voice, "Cousin, hurry up and run." The moment he shouted these words, Zhang Chuhan immediately took out a thumb-sized exquisite hidden weapon from his bosom. In the blink of an eye, a golden light shot towards Chu Xiu's chest center acupuncture point. The speed of the golden light was extremely fast. Moreover, it unexpectedly ignored the Zhenqi protecting Chu Xiu's body and directly pierced into Chu Xiu's chest center acupuncture point. However, before Zhang Chuhan could heave a sigh of relief, he saw that Chu Xiu didn't seem to be affected at all. A bloody light flashed in his hand, and in the blink of an eye, everything in front of him was blood red. In the next moment, he saw a headless corpse lying on the ground, blood gushing out like a fountain. It was his own corpse. Chu Xiu pulled out a golden needle from his Tanzhong acupoint, looked at it for a moment and threw it on the ground, lightly said, "A hidden weapon of Qianji sect? It is indeed much more exquisite than the hidden weapons of the Tang family fort." Zhang Baining seemed to be scared silly by her cousin's death, but at this time, she was shouting in her heart, "This person in front of me is simply a monster." Although the Zhang family was a small family, they still had some resources. The hidden weapon of Qianji sect that Zhang Chuhan took out just now was one of their trump cards. Even the gang qi of an expert of 5 qis collecting in the origin stage could not block this small golden needle. Being pierced into a vital acupoint would definitely cause serious damage. As a result, when Chu Xiu's Tanzhong acupoint was pierced, he didn't even have the slightest reaction. Was he still a human? Could it be that his meridians and acupoints were all wrong? Zhang Baining's guess was right. Chu Xiu's acupoints were really wrong. Although the great acupoint shifting skill was only a supplementary skill, it was more useful than any other martial arts when dealing with finger techniques that specialized in attacking acupoints or those kinds of hidden weapons. Alright, stop playing tricks. It's time for me to send you on your way. The expressions of the 4 guards of the Zhang family suddenly changed. However, before they could make a move, they were greeted by the powerful crimson rain of blades. In an instant, the entire inn was covered with blood. These martial artists who were not even in the physical invulnerability realm wanted to block Chu Xiu's blade. Zhang Baining, who was behind Chu Xiu, seemed to be scared out of her wits. However, before Chu Xiu could turn around, a black dagger suddenly appeared in Zhang Baining's hand. Even the blade was black. With a whistling wind, it stabbed towards Chu Xiu. This dagger contained the venom produced in Miaojiang of Bashu, and it was the kind that was mixed with more than 10 kinds of venom. It was very evil and strange. Not to mention that Chu Xiu was in the physical invulnerability realm. Even if he was in the origin stage of 5 cheese collecting in the origin stage, he would not feel good if he was cut by this dagger. Most importantly, Zhang Beining's momentum when she attacked was not the slightest bit ostentatious. Her movements were extremely fast. Even the vibration of the dagger when it cut through the air was offset by her control. Although it was nothing in the eyes of a martial artist like Chu Xiu, who had already reached the physical invulnerability realm, Zhang Beining's strength was already considered good for a martial artist in the innate realm. However, Zhang Beining's attack did not even pierce through Chu Xiu's protective upstanding qi. After practicing the great immemorial art of heaven and earth chaos, the density of Chu Xiu's upstanding qi was simply beyond Zhang Beining's imagination. The dagger seemed to have fallen into a swamp. It was only 3 inches away from Chu Xiu's body, and it could no longer move forward. However, Chu Xiu turned around and said with a faint smile on his face, "Miss Zhang, your strength is not bad. It is not like what you said, that you are just a weak woman. With your current strength, even your infatuated cousin is no match for you." The dagger in Zhang Beining's hand fell to the ground with a clang. Her face showed a look of horror, and she shouted, "I beg you, young master, don't kill me. The Zhang family is already gone. I am willing to do anything for you, young master. Please spare my life." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Do anything for me? That sounds very tempting. Unfortunately, the more beautiful a woman is, the more deceptive she is. So, I don't believe you." As his voice fell, Chu Xiu directly blasted out a palm. The powerful palm force directly shattered Zhang Beining's heart meridian. Zhang Beining looked at Chu Xiu in disbelief. It seemed that she did not expect that Chu Xiu would kill her like this. He did not hesitate to slap her to death. The other martial artists who were watching from a distance did not know what had happened. They could only vaguely see that Chu Xiu suddenly became violent and killed all the people present. In particular, in the end, Chu Xiu even killed Zhang Beining. This made them secretly despise Chu Xiu. Such a beautiful woman was killed by this guy. Was there any justice in this world? Was there any law? He was worse than a beast. But then everyone felt a chill in their hearts. This person's murderous nature was too heavy. In less than a quarter of an hour, more than a dozen people had died in the inn. They felt a chill in their hearts. They did not even dare to watch anymore. They quickly turned around and left. In Jianghu, the people who were really feared were not the fierce men who gave up their seats to Chu Xiu, but people like Chu Xiu, who looked harmless but could kill your whole family without batting an eyelid. In the eyes of such people, there was no such thing as gender, beauty, or ugliness. As long as he had the intention to kill, there was only the living or the dead in front of him. At this time, in the inn, Chu Xiu took out a gold ingot and put it on the table. He turned and left directly. He had killed so many people here. It was estimated that the inn owner had a shadow in his heart. He definitely did not dare to open a shop here. This gold ingot could be considered as compensation. In fact, Chu Xiu was not as crazy as the group of onlookers outside thought. Such a delicate beauty had said that she was willing to be his slave. In the end, he killed her. Zhang Beining had the cultivation of the innate realm at a young age. Her strength was not inferior to her cousin, but she was stronger than a man. Moreover, she was shrewd enough. Such a woman was definitely not someone that an idiot like Zhang Chuhan could control. Chu Xiu did not want to warm his bed with her. It was not bad to have her as his subordinate. Sometimes, a woman's lethality was greater than a man's. However, shrewdness was not a mistake. Zhang Beining's mistake was that she was too calculative. Moreover, she could not see herself clearly. She was a little too unstable. She dared to show off her acting skills in front of Chu Xiu. She did not know that Chu Xiu had never lost to anyone in this game. Outside the official road of Ji State Changlin County, Chu Xiu walked on the side of the road. Along the way, he looked at the countless warriors coming and going from Ji State Prefecture. The Mirror Lake Villa was located outside of the Ji State. It was next to a large, clear, green lake. That was why it was named the Mirror Lake Villa. At this time, the God Weapon Conference had not started, so Mirror Lake Villa did not receive guests for the time being. Warriors who wanted to participate in the God Weapon Conference or came to watch the fun gathered in Ji State Prefecture. Changlin County was a large county in the center of eastern Qi. Ji State Prefecture was the center of Changlin County. Previously, it was extremely prosperous. Now, because of the God Weapon Conference, martial arts flourished even more. Of course, for the local forces in Ji State Prefecture, they were somewhat miserable. They even secretly cursed the people of Hidden Sword Villa and the Mo family. Previously, they were the local bullies in Ji State Prefecture. Even if they came, they would have to be polite to them. However, now, the people who came and went were either young talents on the Longhu list, elite disciples of various sects, or some heroes of the Jianghu. Regardless of the strength or the forces behind these people, the local bullies in Ji State Prefecture could not afford to offend them. Therefore, during this period of time, they had been very careful and did not dare to offend anyone. Chu Xiu followed the crowd and stepped into Ji State Prefecture. When he looked up, he saw that there were warriors everywhere, and they were all very young. Generally, those who entered the innate stage at the age of 20 were already considered the elites of the younger generation in the Jianghu. However, at this time, in Ji State Prefecture, there were many innate stage warriors around the age of 20. At this moment, a skinny warrior in his 30s squeezed through the crowd and came in front of Chu Xiu. He cupped his hands and said, "Sir, do you need a guide? The God Weapon Conference will start in almost a month. Wouldn't it be very bad to wait here for such a long time? During this time, sir can have a good time in Ji State Prefecture. I am Li Bu-san. I have been in Ji State Prefecture all my life. I dare not say anything else, but I am very familiar with Ji State Prefecture and Changlin County. Money is not a problem. Sir, just give as you see fit." Chapter 212. Chu Xiu looked at Li Bu-san with interest and asked doubtfully, "There are so many people in the pugilistic world, why did you choose me? How do you know that I can afford you? Aren't you afraid that I'm one of those poor rogue cultivators?" Li Bu-san chuckled and said, "In this line of work, I rely on my pair of eyes. How can I not be careful? Most of the young masters from the aristocratic families in brocade clothes have servants accompanying them. They don't need someone like me to be their guide. Young master, although you don't look like a martial artist from an aristocratic family or a big sect, I'm sure that you're not an ordinary rogue cultivator. When ordinary rogue cultivators see so many experts and young talents gathered in the Ji State Prefecture, they will definitely feel guilty. Anyone who sees so many young talents far surpassing them will not have confidence. But young master, your eyes are looking at everyone present. Obviously, you don't care about the people in the Ji State Prefecture. You have absolute confidence." Chu Xiu touched his nose. How could he not know that his gaze was so conspicuous? Why did it have a "everyone here is trash" look? What else? You think I'm not an ordinary rogue cultivator based on this? Li Bu-san chuckled and said, "Of course not. Although I can't see the blade of the long saber at your waist, the handle is inlaid with red rock crystals from the East Sea. It's more valuable than purple gold. The handle is already so valuable, let alone the blade. Of course, there's one more thing. I can confirm your identity. Although you're not from an aristocratic family or a big sect, since you were sent by the Guangzhong torture room to participate in the God Weapon Conference, you're definitely not an ordinary person." This time, Chu Xiu was really surprised. He asked doubtfully, you actually know about the Guanzhong torture room? In the Guanzhong region, the Guanzhong torture room could be said to be well known. However, after leaving the Guanzhong region, Chu Xiu only knew how low-key the Guanzhong torture room was. The disciples of other sects and aristocratic families needed to roam the pugilistic world, but the Guanzhong torture room didn't need to. They only needed to guard their own territory. Therefore, most of the people in Jianghu had only heard of the Guanzhong torture room, but they had never seen anyone in the Guanzhong torture room. The only people who had a deep impression of the Guanzhong torture room were the people from the imperial court or those from the major sects and aristocratic families. The Guanzhong torture room was unique in solving cases and investigating traces. If the imperial court and the big martial arts forces had something they could not solve, they would ask the Guanzhong torture room to investigate. These people had more contact with the Guanzhong torture room. As for the others, except for those who had been to Guanzhong personally, it was almost impossible for them to have contact with the Guanzhong torture room. Li Busan smiled and said, I used to be a caravan guard for a period of time and followed the Eastern Qi caravan to Guanzhong. I also saw the power of the Jianghu constables in the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu nodded in understanding and threw Li Busan an ingot of purple gold, which was about 10 taels. Alright, then you can follow me for now. Introduce me to the good places in the Ji province prefecture. Receiving the purple gold, Li Busan's eyes immediately revealed a trace of joy. This lord was indeed very generous. He actually gave out purple gold instead of ordinary gold and silver. Li Busan put away the purple gold and quickly said, the Ji province is the center of our Changlin county. Naturally, there are many good places. However, with young master's strength and status, you probably won't be interested in them. Therefore, there are only 3 truly good places. One of them is the Mo family's weapon shop. Don't be fooled by its ordinary name. However, there are quite a number of people who have come for it. Chu Xiu was astonished and asked, this weapon shop is opened by the Mo family of the Mirror Lake Manor? Li Busan praised, young master is indeed smart. Although Grandmaster Mo Yezi has already stepped down from his position as the master of the magical weapon pavilion and retired from the pugilistic world, he has after all been a blacksmith his whole life. Even after retiring from the pugilistic world, he would still forge some weapons from time to time as practice. For a blacksmith like Grandmaster Mo Yezi, the weapons he casually forged were all practice items. However, for the people of the pugilistic world, they are treasures that they can only dream of. Grandmaster Mo Yezi's practice items are also occasionally sold in the Mo family's weapon shop. The people of the Mo family will not say which weapon was personally forged by Grandmaster Mo Yezi. Being able to buy it is your luck and fate. Only after you have bought it will the Mo family tell you. Therefore, there are many people who come to the Mo family's weapon shop to try their luck. Moreover, as the descendants of Grandmaster Mo Yezi, the people of the Mo family are also experts in forging weapons. The various weapons produced by the Mo family can be said to be treasures in the pugilistic world. Chu Xiu nodded, but he was not tempted. Chu Xiu's red sleeve blade was a 5th revolution artifact. Even among 5th revolution artifacts, it was considered to be above average. Unless there was a 6th revolution artifact, and it had to be suitable for Chu Xiu's attributes, it would not be of much use to Chu Xiu. Even if Mo Yezi was a great master of smithing, a 6th revolution precious weapon was not something he could refine just because he wanted to. Just the materials alone were already an astonishing number. When a weapon reached the level of an artifact, each revolution was a different level. 4th revolution was easy to obtain, 5th revolution was hard to find, and 6th revolution was already a treasure. What about the other 2 places? Chu Xiu asked. Li Busan chuckled and said in a slightly wretched tone, the other 2 places are a brothel and a restaurant. The brothel is the famous Phoenix Cry Xiaoxiang restaurant in the whole Eastern Qi. There are all kinds of beauties from all over the world gathered there. There are tall and elegant northern Yen beauties, gentle beauties from eastern Qi, and charming and enchanting beauties from western Chu. There are also many foreign race beauties in the Phoenix Cry Xiaoxiang restaurant. For example, there are some foreign race beauties from the East Sea Islands. Although their skin is a bit dark, their bodies are alluring, as if they have no bones. Also, the beauties from the western regions are all blonde and have enchanting and graceful figures. It is said that some of them are nobles and princesses of some small countries in the western regions. Li Bu-san was almost drooling as he spoke. For a bottom-level Jianghu person like him, even if he had purple gold in his hand, he would not be able to enter the gate of Phoenix Cry Xiaoxiang restaurant. This kind of place was prepared for those real Jianghu heroes and big shots, and could not be entered just by taking money. However, he was not qualified, but Chu Xiu was. If Chu Xiu wanted to go to the Phoenix Cry Xiaoxiang restaurant, he could use the identity of Chu Xiu's attendant to enter. Maybe he could really get close to her. However, Chu Xiu was not interested in his description. It should be said that those who still went to the brothel at this time were basically some rich young masters of some families. The God Weapon Conference was about to start. Instead of recuperating and adjusting your state, you squandered your energy in the brothel and indulged in the beauty of women. Are you looking for death when you really go to the arena? Love is like a steel knife that scrapes bones. Liking beauty and indulging in beauty are two different concepts. If you don't have a sense of propriety in front of important matters, you are doomed to not achieve anything. There were even some extreme martial artists in Jianghu who, before achieving great success in martial arts, had to maintain their primordial yang energy. They would not get close to women and would even reject all desires for food or luxuries. They lived like ascetic monks. Although it seemed incomprehensible, they were often able to maintain the firmest heart of martial arts. Their willpower was absolutely incomparable to that of ordinary people. Of course, Chu Xiu could not live such a life. He was not a real monk. Chu Xiu did not ask any further about the Phoenix Cry Xiaoxiang restaurant. He directly asked, "What about the last place?" Seeing that Chu Xiu was not interested in the Phoenix Cry Xiaoxiang restaurant, Li Bu-san could not help but shake his head in pity. He continued, "The last place is the 9-story dragon gathering pavilion built by the music king of Qi, Jianghu. The first 4 floors can be entered as long as you have money. If you want to enter the last 5 floors, it is not so easy. You need to have status, fame, or strength. The higher your status, the greater your fame, and the stronger your strength, the higher floors you can enter and the more things you can enjoy. The food on the first 4 floors are prepared for ordinary people or ordinary martial artists. In the last 5 floors, the ingredients for every dish are extremely precious spirit herbs and even the world's rarest treasures. Even the wine is made from some rare fruits. A single sip is equivalent to several days of cultivation." Speaking of this, Li Bu-san's saliva dripped down. Although he was only a martial artist of the lowest level, he was still a martial artist. His desire for things that could enhance his cultivation was not inferior to that of beautiful women. Hearing this, Chu Xiu's interest was piqued. This dragon gathering pavilion was quite extravagant. They actually used all kinds of spirit medicines to make dishes and wine. Although these rare and precious spirit herbs could be turned into dishes and brewed into wine, they would still have the same medicinal effect, but they would certainly be less effective than those pills that had been carefully refined by an alchemist. This kind of behavior, in addition to satisfying one's appetite, was simply a waste of resources. But even so, the dragon gathering pavilion still dared to do such a thing. One could only imagine how rich their family was. Having a royal background really made a difference. But at this time, Chu Xiu seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He asked abruptly, "Prince Anil, Jianghu? Isn't the Qi royal family surnamed Liu? Why is there a prince with a different surname? Conferred the title of prince?" Among the 3 countries, there were only a handful of people who had been conferred the title of prince. Every one of them was a powerful expert with tens of thousands of troops under their command. But this Jiang Wenyuan's name, Chu Xiu had never heard of it before. At this time, Li Busan laughed awkwardly and said, "It's not a conferment of Prince Anil. Prince Anil is actually a member of the previous royal family. The title of prince is hereditary." As he spoke, Li Busan explained the situation to Chu Xiu. In fact, the reason was very simple. Hundreds of years ago, the Qi royal family did not have the surname Lu, but Jiang. However, the last generation of the Jiang royal family was too muddle-headed and almost brought Eastern Qi to his death. In the end, he was deposed by several generals of Eastern Qi and was replaced by the Lu royal family. In order to show their benevolence, the Lu royal family did not massacre the Jiang royal family. Instead, they conferred them the title of prince, allowing them to live in luxury for hundreds of years without being able to wield power. Chapter 213. Chu Xiu had never heard of the history of the land of Eastern Qi hundreds of years ago in the original plot. Now that he heard it, it was quite novel. The fact that several generals could destroy the bloodline of the royal family showed how weak the Jiang royal family was back then. In this world where martial power was respected, no one cared about things like monarch, minister, father and son, loyalty, filial piety, benevolence, and so on. Martial power was always placed above these things. When the emperor and the entire royal family were powerful, the people under them would bow down to them. On the contrary, if even the royal family was completely weakened, why would they follow the orders of a good-for-nothing? Moreover, after listening to Li Busan talk about Jiang Wenyuan, Chu Xiu felt that Jiang Wenyuan was courting death. Why could the Jiang bloodline survive until now? Because the Eastern Qi royal family valued their reputation. Although the Jiang bloodline was dismissed because the current generation of the royal family was indeed useless and the emperor was too muddle-headed, Eastern Qi was likely to face the destruction of the country if they continued to be foolishly loyal. However, it was still a plot to usurp the throne, and it was not a good thing to say. Now, the Eastern Qi royal family could be said to be a prostitute and yet still have a good reputation. The fact that they did not exterminate the Jiang bloodline was their reputation. If the Jiang bloodline had been content to be rich, it would have been fine. The Eastern Qi royal family would not have let this reputation collapse. Just from the title they gave the Jiang bloodline, one could tell that they would live a peaceful and happy life. As long as they did not cause any trouble, the throne would always be hereditary. However, the Jiang bloodline was very stubborn. They relied on the fact that the Eastern Qi royal family valued their reputation and did not dare to touch him, so they often competed with the Eastern Qi royal family. Li Busan was not clear about other things, but what Jiang Wenyuan was doing now was purely courting death in Chu Xiu's view. He was challenging the nerves of the Eastern Qi royal family. For example, the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion he opened would not be a problem for others, but it would be a big problem for Jiang Wenyuan. Why? Does your Jiang bloodline want to gather the Dragon Qi and take back the throne that belongs to you? Also, why did the Dragon Gathering Pavilion have 9 floors? Moreover, only the last 5 floors had entry requirements, not the last 6 or the last 4 floors. Combined with the identity of the Jiang bloodline, it was easy to associate them with the term, Supreme Ruler. Jiang Wenyuan had really taken the Eastern Qi royal family as fools, or perhaps he was a little too fearless, which was why he dared to do these things so blatantly. There was also Jiang Wenyuan. Although his martial arts talent was not very good, and could even be said to be very poor, he was already in his 40s, and had only reached the Xiantian realm with the help of countless pills. His combat strength was even worse. However, he was very fond of making friends with people from Jianghu, especially those from big sects and aristocratic families. It could even be said that as long as one was able to set foot on the last 5 floors of the Dragon Assembling Pavilion, Jiang Wenyuan would personally come out to welcome them. Everyone knew how the current Eastern Qi royal family had seized the throne of Eastern Qi in the past. They had relied on force to force the abdication. But now, you've made friends with so many Jianghu people. What are you doing? Are you trying to rebel? Chu Xiu didn't know if Jiang Wenyuan had good luck or the endurance of the Dongqi royal family to be able to survive until now. In Chu Xiu's previous life, there was a person who was very similar to Jiang Wenyuan, and the things he did were also very similar. However, his ending was very miserable. That person's name was Chai Jin. Of course, none of this had much to do with the current Chu Xiu. Instead, he was very interested in the fine wine and delicacies made from spiritual herbs in the Dragon Assembling Pavilion. With Li Busan leading the way, Chu Xiu directly arrived at the Dragon Assembling Pavilion. Since ancient times, Eastern Qi had been prosperous. A 9-story building was not considered rare. However, the Dragon Assembling Pavilion was exceptionally grand. The height of one floor was almost comparable to 2 floors of other restaurants. Therefore, in the Qi Province Prefecture, the Dragon Assembling Pavilion could be said to be the tallest building. The exterior was also very luxurious and magnificent. The precious glazed tiles were used as ordinary bricks. Furthermore, every floor was carved with a coiling dragon statue. The exterior was gilded, but the eyes and the pearls in the dragon's mouth were made of extremely precious gemstones. By doing this, the Dragon Assembling Pavilion was equivalent to placing a pile of precious treasures on the streets. However, Jiang Wenyuan was not worried that someone would steal it. In fact, no one would dare to steal it. After all, Jiang Wenyuan was the king of ease of Eastern Qi. On top of that, he had opened the Dragon Assembling Pavilion for so many years. He had made friends with many disciples from the big sects and many outstanding talents in Jianghu. Who would not give him face? Daring to steal from the Dragon Assembling Pavilion was equivalent to courting death. Stepping into the Dragon Assembling Pavilion, the interior was decorated with jewels and jewels. However, it was only splendid, not gaudy. Just as Chu Xiu and Li Busan stepped through the door, a well-dressed waiter approached them and asked respectfully, "Which floor would you like to go to?" The last 5 floors were specially prepared for the elites. The first 4 floors were also based on how much money one had in their pockets. Each floor had a different spending level. If someone with a lower level went to the 4th floor and pretended to be rich, the consequences would be very miserable. Li Busan proudly said, "My young master is planning to go to the last 5 floors." As soon as these words were spoken, the attention of all the customers immediately turned to look at them. However, when they saw Chu Xiu and Li Busan, most of the customers had a look of mockery in their eyes. Not everyone could enter the last 5 floors of the Dragon Assembling Pavilion. Before the God Weapon Conference started, those who entered the Dragon Assembling Pavilion were the young talents of Eastern Qi. Most of the waiters knew each other and they would be directly led to the last 5 floors. After the God Weapon Conference started, some of the rogue martial artists from Northern Yen and West Chu did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. They even wanted to enter the last 5 floors. In the end, they were taught a lesson. Some of them even dared to make a scene in the Dragon Assembling Pavilion. The consequences were obvious. Now, Chu Xiu and Li Busan were dressed very ordinarily. Especially Li Busan, he was just an ordinary martial artist of the lowest level. How could such a person be qualified to enter the Dragon Assembling Pavilion? As people of Eastern Qi, these people looked at the martial artists from Northern Yen and West Chu with a sense of superiority. The land of Eastern Qi was vast and abundant. Nearly half of the martial artists in the world were gathered in Eastern Qi. Martial arts flourished and the land was prosperous. Its historical heritage was also much more extensive than that of Northern Yen and West Chu. Therefore, in the eyes of the people of Eastern Qi, the people of West Chu were all southern barbarians. As for the Northern Yen, they were just northern barbarians who came from the barren mountains and unruly rivers. Although Eastern Qi had lost the war with Northern Yen a few years ago, it was only the loss of Wei Jun. Eastern Qi was far from a serious loss. Moreover, the war that Eastern Qi had faced was not so simple. Below them were the armies of the Northern Yan imperial court. Above them were the experts of the Northern Yan martial artists. Eastern Qi had to fight 1 against 2. It was normal for them to lose. At the very least, they could still treat these foreign martial artists with a superior attitude. The waiter did not show any unfriendly attitude towards Chu Xiu like the other customers. The Dragon Assembling Pavilion had been open for so many years. There were countless martial artists who came and went. What kind of strange people had they not seen? Even if it was a beggar, he might be an expert from the beggar sect. They would still politely welcome him. "Young master, please come with me." The waiter gestured to Chu Xiu, but turned to Li Busan and said, "Attendants are not allowed in the last 5 floors." The waiter was not an ordinary waiter. He was also in the blood condensation realm. He could see through Li Busan's strength with a single glance. Li Busan smiled awkwardly and said, "Young master, please go up. I will wait for you downstairs." Originally, he had wanted to borrow Chu Xiu's fame to take a look at the last 5 floors of the Dragon Assembling Pavilion. But now it seemed that the rules of the Dragon Assembling Pavilion were very strict. If everyone brought their attendants up, how could there be so many seats in the Dragon Assembling Pavilion? Chu Xiu nodded. The waiter brought Chu Xiu to the 5th floor and said, "Young master, the last 5 floors of the Dragon Assembling Pavilion are not open to the public. The 5th, 6th, and 7th floors are open to the public as long as you display your strength. As for the 8th floor, it is specially used to entertain some seniors of the martial arts world. Only the prince can personally greet you. As for the 9th floor, it is not open to the public. It is specially used by the prince to entertain important guests." Chu Xiu asked, "How do I display my strength?" The waiter clapped his hands. Immediately, an inner gang realm martial artist in his 30s walked to the door from the hut next to him. This inner aura realm martial artist was tall and sturdy. With a heavy sword in his hand, he gave off a strong sense of oppression. It's very simple. As long as you can withstand Cha Kuei's attack for an hour, you can enter the 5th floor. Young master can also fight with ease here. The Dragon Assembling Pavilion is filled with formations. Even a great expert in the unity of the world realm cannot break it, the waiter said. At this time, Chu Xiu discovered that the entrance to the 5th floor was different from the other floors. The entrance was much wider than the one downstairs. It was obviously prepared for fights. At this time, the people on the 4th floor looked at Chu Xiu with a trace of interest. They were all discussing among themselves. "Another person who wants to enter the 5th floor? How many has there been already? It must be one of those Northern Yan or West Chu barbarians. Hehe, West Chu and Northern Yan are barren places. How many experts can they produce? Most of them are country bumpkins who have never seen the world. Why don't we all make a bet on how many moves this kid can withstand from Overlord Sword, Cha Kuei? More than 10 people came yesterday. In the end, only 1 could withstand. The rest were all sent flying by Cha Kuei's sword. I bet less than 10 moves. Cha Kuei is a slave from the South Sea bought by Prince Anil. He was born with great strength. Don't be fooled by his inner invulnerability. His pure strength is greater than an outer invulnerability realm martial artist. This kid looks very skinny. Even if Cha Kuei doesn't kill him, he won't last more than a few moves." Just as the people on the 4th floor were discussing, Chu Xiu suddenly took a step forward. In an instant, a strong gust of earth energy surged towards Cha Kuei. The heaven and earth were chaotic. The incomparably dense power of the primordial elements crashed down like a mountain. Chapter 214. The disciples of the big sects or aristocratic families paid the most attention to the foundation, but Chu Xiu's foundation was not inferior to theirs. With the Xiantian skill as the starting point, it made up for Chu Xiu's previous shortcomings in cultivation. Recently, Chu Xiu obtained the great art of chaos of heaven and earth from the sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang of heaven and earth, which evolved his internal force into the origin of chaos, which was even more powerful and vigorous to the extreme. When Chu Xiu took that step forward, his aura instantly turned the world upside down. It was as if he had transformed from an ordinary person into an ancient demonic god in an instant. As he stepped out, the great art of chaos of heaven and earth was exerted to the extreme. The gang qi around Chu Xiu was invisible and intangible, but there were visible fluctuations. As he stepped out again, people on the entire fourth floor felt the inside of the building shake. Chu Xiu's foot seemed to step on their chests, which made them feel very depressed. These were just the senses of ordinary people. Cha Kuei, who bore the brunt, felt as if his chest was hit by a big hammer, and a trace of cold sweat slid down his forehead. Chu Xiu took 3 steps forward, each step stronger than the one before, and each step more oppressive than the one before. By the time Chu Xiu arrived in front of Cha Kuei, his face was already flushed red, and he was sweating profusely. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's momentum completely disappeared. In an instant, like the spring wind and rain, his momentum fell from the peak to the extreme. Clang! The heavy sword in Cha Kuei's hand directly fell to the ground, and with a bitter face, he said in a slightly stiff Eastern Qi accent, "I lost." The waiter suddenly looked at Cha Kuei dumbfounded and said in surprise, "Lord Cha Kuei, what are you doing?" Cha Kuei ignored the waiter and directly made a very strange bow to Chu Xiu, saying, "You are a strong man." What Cha Kuei admires the most is the strong man. You are qualified to enter the 5th floor. Just now, he could already feel the terror of Chu Xiu's aura. It was like a dark cloud pressing down on a city. Once it descended, it would cause the sky to fall and the earth to crack. When the saber was hidden in the scabbard, it was the scariest. Chu Xiu's attack was the same. The aura of each step climbed to the peak, but no one knew where Chu Xiu's peak was. Each step gave Cha Kuei a great deal of pressure. The last straw that broke the camel's back was that Chu Xiu took the initiative to loosen that powerful aura, displaying his powerful control over gang qi that made people despair. Cha Kuei was born with divine strength. With his own strength, he could even fight against a physical invulnerability realm martial artist. But when facing Chu Xiu, he did not even have the courage to draw his sword. The waiter beside Chu Xiu was stunned. With his current realm, of course, he could not understand the contest between Cha Kuei and Chu Xiu. But since Cha Kuei said that he had already admitted defeat, and even made a rare bow to Chu Xiu, which was a small tribe, his attitude explained everything. The waiter said to Chu Xiu respectfully, "Sir, you can go up directly. There will be someone up there to welcome you. I am not qualified to enter the 5th floor yet." As Chu Xiu's figure stepped into the 5th floor, the people on the 4th floor suddenly burst into an uproar. They began to discuss who Chu Xiu was. This was not the first time they had come to the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. Regardless of whether they were martial artists from Eastern Qi or not, there were many who wanted to challenge the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. There were also many who could pass Cha Kuei's test. But most of them had to withstand 10 moves from Cha Kuei before they could enter. Only a small number of them had defeated Cha Kuei and entered. But no one could force Cha Kuei to admit defeat without even using one move. Who was this person? These people were familiar with most of the young talents on the Longhu list. Most importantly, if a famous young talent was here, they would not need to pass through the floors one by one. Naturally, there would be a waiter who would directly bring them to the last 5 floors. Chu Xiu didn't recognize this person. Just who was he? Chu Xiu could not be bothered with the surprise of the people below. But the 5th floor of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion really surprised Chu Xiu. The lower 4 floors were mainly decorated with dazzling gold and jade, but the fifth floor was very simple and elegant. There was a trace of simple and unadorned aura everywhere. Seeing Chu Xiu step into the fifth floor, the martial artists on the fifth floor subconsciously forgot about Chu Xiu. When they saw that Chu Xiu was an unfamiliar face, they revealed a look of sizing him up. In the past, the fifth floor of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion was mostly filled with the more outstanding martial artists of the younger generation of Eastern Qi and some of the more famous martial artists. Everyone knew each other. It was not until the God Weapon Conference that so many outsiders came. In the fifth floor, a Xiantian martial artist dressed as a waiter walked over. When he saw Chu Xiu's appearance, his eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. With a trace of doubt, he asked, "Young master, are you from the Guanzhong torture room?" The attendants on the lower 4 floors were mainly used to serve ordinary martial artists and wealthy merchants. Therefore, they were only in the blood condensation realm and did not see through Chu Xiu's identity. The attendants on the last 5 floors were not weak. Although they were called attendants of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion, in reality, they were the Prince of Anlu, Jiang Wenyuan's retainers. They were also the kind of people who were knowledgeable and quick-witted. They could almost see through Chu Xiu's identity at a glance. However, the Guanzhong torture room had always kept a low profile. Apart from handling cases, they would not appear in Jianghu and would not participate in any of the various gatherings. Moreover, in his impression, the people in the Guanzhong torture room were all middle-aged and experienced constables. There were very few young people like Chu Xiu, so he was not sure if he was Chu Xiu. This time, Chu Xiu had come to the God Weapon Conference with the mission of spreading the name of the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, he did not hide anything and said directly, "Yes, I am under the Guanzhong torture room, Guanxi Patrol Chu Xiu." When the attendant heard this, a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. He could be considered to be familiar with the Guanzhong torture room, so he naturally knew what kind of position the patrol had in the Guanzhong torture room. They were definitely part of the central power of the room. The person in front of him had become a patrol at such a young age and was sent by the Guanzhong torture room to participate in the God Weapon Conference. It seemed that the Guanzhong torture room was not going to keep a low profile this time. This was big news, and he had to report it to the Lord later. In the eyes of outsiders, the Dragon Jailing Pavilion was a place where the elites of Jianghu ate, drank, and enjoyed. It was a place to show their status. But in fact, to Jiang Wenyuan, this place was used to make friends with the elites of Jianghu and to inquire about information. However, the attendant felt that the name Chu Xiu sounded familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. "Young Master Chu, are you going to stay on the 5th floor or continue to go up?" the attendant asked. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Which is better, the treatment on the 5th floor or the 7th floor?" The attendant said, "Of course it's the 7th floor. In the last 5 floors, the dishes and drinks prepared on each floor are different. The 7th floor is the best floor apart from the last 2 floors that are not open to the public. Then let's continue upwards." The cultivator nodded and directly led Chu Xiu to the entrance of the 6th floor. Sure enough, there was a guard here. However, it was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s and had a hideous scar on his face. The people on the 5th floor were also sizing up Chu Xiu. Those who were able to enter the 5th floor were at least at the inner aura stage. Moreover, they were considered experts within the inner aura stage. An ordinary inner aura stage martial artist would not be able to withstand a few strikes from Cha Kuei. Their knowledge was not as shallow as the people on the lower 4 floors, who only knew to judge a book by its cover. There were almost no mediocre people who could enter the 5th floor. "This is His Highness Retainer, the Blood Rain Cold Light Sword, Shao Ting of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. If young Master Chu can last 15 minutes under Mr. Zhao's sword, you can reach the 6th floor." Hearing the name of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect, Chu Xiu could not help but examine Shao Ting. He seemed to have a fate with the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Back in the northern Yen, he had killed Zhang Baitao of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Similarly, the green lightning sword, Chen Jiao, who followed behind the Heaven Sin Division leader and sucked up to him, was also from the Ba Mountain Sword sect. Chu Xiu also found something very interesting. The Ba Mountain Sword sect seemed to have a problem with how they educated their disciples. Why did they always have abandoned disciples? It made him feel like he was deserted. While the attendant did not say that Xiao Ting was an abandoned disciple, even an idiot would know why a disciple of the Ba Mountain Sword sect, one of the 7 sects and 8 schools, would come all the way from West Chu to Eastern Qi to be a retainer of a king. If this wasn't an abandoned disciple, what was? In Chu Xiu's view, some of Jiang Wenyuan's actions seemed to be seeking death. The attendants on every floor of the Dragon Assembling Pavilion were not weak, and his hanger-ons were also the cream of the crop among those of the same level. One could imagine just how powerful his Prince of Enli's palace was. A King Anil raising so many powerful warriors, if this wasn't seeking death, then what was? When he, the King Anil, could no longer give the Eastern Qi royal family peace, then his peace would probably come to an end. At this time, the attendant said to Xiao Ting in a low voice, "This is Master Chu who represents the Guanzhong torture room." The Dragon Gathering Pavilion did not set this rule to offend people, but to distinguish between some true young elites and those who wanted to take advantage of the situation. So retainers like Xiao Ting only played the role of a touchstone. If someone was injured in the process, then it would be self-defeating. So the attendant specially reminded Xiao Ting of Chu Xiu's background and told him to pay attention. Xiao Ting nodded calmly and said to Chu Xiu, "Master Chu, be careful. My sword is very fast." Chu Xiu grinned and said, "My blade is also very fast." Xiao Ting expressionlessly pulled out the long sword with a bright red edge. He had guarded the door of the 6th floor for a long time. What kind of young elites had he not seen? It was normal for these young elites to be confident and arrogant. But it was a pity that these so-called young elites would quickly be defeated. In terms of cultivation speed at the same age, he indeed couldn't compare to these young geniuses that came from the great powers, but his sword technique was forged from slaughtering his way through a rain of blood. Chapter 215. The Ba Mountain Sword sect's fast sword arts were famed in the world. Ba Mountain Night Rain, Purple Lightning and Thunder. This 8-character sword art had offense and defense, internal and external. The Ba Mountain Sword sect disciples who cultivated multiple sword arts were even more powerful. Xiao Ting had been an outstanding disciple of the Ba Mountain Sword sect in the past. He had cultivated the Ba Mountain Sword Manual, the Purple Lightning Azure Light Sword, and the Floating Rain sword art. He raised his hand and brandished his sword. In an instant, the sky was filled with faint purple sword shadows that slashed towards Chu Xiu. As the sword shadows fluttered in the air, every one of them seemed to be real. They carried an extremely powerful aura and were extremely fast. Their might was also extremely powerful. The people on the 5th level shook their heads. Mr. Zhao's sword was even faster. If he had not been expelled by the Ba Mountain Sword sect in the past, with his present strength, he would definitely be heavily nurtured by the Ba Mountain Sword sect. Xiao Ting's sword was indeed very fast. The Ba Mountain Sword Manual focused on sword energy, the Purple Lightning Azure Light Sword focused on speed and power, and the Floating Rain Sword focused on powerful sword presence. Right now, Xiao Ting had merged these 3 sword moves into one. His power, speed, and presence were almost invulnerable. There were very few martial artists of the same level who could last 15 minutes under such a powerful attack. Pity, there was nothing in this world that was truly invulnerable. Xiao Ting's sword was fast and powerful. It was actually very simple to defeat him. That was to be faster than his sword, and stronger than him. The moment the sword energy neared him, Chu Xiu also slashed down with his blade. In a flash, the crimson blood shadow dyed the entire 5th level of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, causing everyone's expressions to change. The blood-refined divine wind exploded with the blade shadows. The bright blade energies were like the light rain falling at dusk, beautiful with dazzling murderous intent. The basic blade skills that Chu Xiu cultivated were the azure dragon in the sleeve and the red sleeve blade of the dusk drizzle. Each of them were powerful and fast blade skills, far faster than Shao Ting. Most importantly, Chu Xiu was stronger than Shao Ting. The Ba Mountain Sword Manual of the Ba Mountain Sword sect was a supplementary sword method that could condense sword energy into a more solid state. But the Ba Mountain Sword sect was not famous in terms of internal strength. In terms of pure power, how could it compare to Chu Xiu's blood-refined divine shield and the great primordial chaos art? In an instant, the crimson saber shadows that filled the sky completely submerged Shao Ting's sword momentum. Shao Ting was still resisting the saber shadows bitterly, but at this moment, he was sweating profusely. He couldn't resist this kind of absolute power unless he used the killer moves that he used when he risked his life. After a few dozen breaths, a clanging sound could be heard. Shao Ting's sword was sent flying. Everyone present was dumbfounded. Many of the people on the 5th floor were locals of Eastern Qi. They were also old customers of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. They knew Shao Ting's strength. Most of them had even fought with Shao Ting before and knew the terror of his fast sword. But now, Shao Ting was defeated in the same way in the area that he was best at. When did the Guanzhong torture room have such a young expert? Shao Ting saluted Chu Xiu bitterly and said, "Young Master Chu, I have lost. You can ascend to the 6th floor. With your strength, it shouldn't be difficult for you to ascend to the 7th floor." As the gatekeeper of the 6th floor, Shao Ting had been defeated before. It was just that he had never been defeated so badly. He had always been proud of his fast sword skills. But today, he was defeated in the area that he was best at. This was a heavy blow to him. The waiter was stunned. He immediately called for another waiter on the 5th floor and asked him to pass the news of Chu Xiu to the prince on the 7th floor. Previously, when Chu Xiu used his aura to suppress Cha Kuei, it was shocking. However, it was impossible to see Chu Xiu's strength. But now, Chu Xiu used his fast sword skills to defeat Shao Ting in a few dozen breaths. This strength was shocking enough. In addition, Chu Xiu came from the Guanzhong torture room. With the status of the prince, they had to make friends with him. The waiter nodded and immediately ascended to the 7th floor. At that moment, there were only a few dozen people on the 7th floor. Not even half of the seats were filled. This was the rule of the Julong court. Only those with strength and status could step onto the 7th floor. Otherwise, even if the seats were empty, they would not let anyone take them. The dozens of people on the 7th floor were divided into 3 groups. The largest group was the local warriors of Eastern Qi. The God Weapon Conference was held in Eastern Qi. Of course, these people were the most complete. The second group was the Northern Yan and West Chu warriors. After all, they were all from the same country, so they knew each other. Therefore, they found a group of people to chat with. Among the Northern Yan group, there was one person that Chu Xiu was familiar with. He was the number 1 of the younger generation in the Floating Snow City, Blood Spear, by Wuji. Among the people on the 7th floor, the Northern Yan had the least people. There were less than 10 of them. One of them was a young man in a blue robe, with a jade-like face. He looked at Bai Wuji and asked, "Brother Bai, why are there so few people from the Northern Yan in this Divine Weapon Conference? Not to mention Eastern Qi, they can't even compare with West Chu. When the God Weapon Conference starts, I'm afraid we will suffer. At that time, we will lose face for the entire Northern Yan. If only the Wisdom King, Zhong Xian from the Great Guangming Temple was here. He is a powerhouse ranked 2nd on the Longhu list. If the Little Celestial Master, Zhang Qingzhen doesn't come, who can beat him?" The person who spoke was Fang Huai, an outstanding disciple of the Fang family in the south of Yan. The Fang family was second only to the Shenwu sect in the south of Yan. Although there was no real pellet state martial arts grand master in the family, there was still a great master in the unity of man and nature realm. With Bai Wuji's identity and status, he naturally didn't need to break through layer by layer. Fang Huai was considered a figure in the south of Yan, but in the eastern Qi, he could only be said to be a nobody. Therefore, he also broke through layer by layer. Although the process was difficult, it also proved that Fang Huai was not that kind of mediocre person. Bai Wuji sneered and said, "I say, you people are just worrying about nothing. It's fine if the monsters in the top 5 of the Longhu list don't come. If they really come, this God Weapon Conference doesn't need to compete anymore. We can just watch the show. The monks of the Great Guangming Temple are cultivating the Vajradhyana behind closed doors. The disciples won't come out easily, so Zhong Xian won't come. If Zhong Xian doesn't come, Zhang Qingzhen won't come, and the sword chief Fang Qishao won't come either." To put it arrogantly, they couldn't bear to look at a divine weapon. It was said that the inherited divine weapon of Sword King City, the startling salamander ranked 21st in the sword book, was prepared for 7th young Master Fang. Without the attraction of the god weapon, these guys can fight whenever they want. Why bother to fight in the ring and let people watch for free? Fang Huai nodded in understanding. After all, the realm was different. The existence in the top 5 of the Longhu list, their realm and vision were no longer something that Fang Huai and the others could easily figure out. For a martial artist at Fang Huai's level, being able to make a name for himself in front of thousands of Jianghu elites was already what he wanted. For those in the top 5 of the Longhu list, fame was no longer something they pursued because they were already famous in the Jianghu. At this time, someone next to him asked, "Right, where is young Master Nye of the Morgue village? Young Master Nye shouldn't be absent from such an event. Moreover, young Master Nye is ranked 6th on the Longhu list. His presence can also boost the morale of the northern Yan." As soon as this was said, everyone present looked at the guy who spoke as if he was an idiot. Was this guy's EQ low, or was he really an idiot? The martial artists of northern Yan origin all knew that Bai Wuji and Nye Donglu had a grudge. Now that Bai Wuji was here, but this guy said that it was a pity that Nye Donglu wasn't here. Did he mean that Bai Wuji couldn't represent the martial artists of northern Yan and was inferior to Nye Donglu? Sure enough, as soon as the martial artist said this, Bai Wuji's face turned gloomy. However, this was Eastern Qi, the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. There were martial artists from other sects here, so Bai Wuji didn't lose his temper. He only sneered and said, "Nye Donglu can't come. He is in seclusion at the Morgue village. Don't you guys know how he got his 6th place on the Longhu list? He schemed and schemed to get to this position, but the top 5 of the Longhu list is not something that can be achieved with just scheming. Moreover, the cultivation of this generation of people on the Longhu list is gradually catching up. When everyone else reaches the 3-flower realm, will he still have the nerve to occupy the 6th place on the Longhu list?" As he said this, Bai Wuji suddenly sneered again and said, "Also, I think Nye Donglu is too ashamed to come here. You guys might not know this, but Nye Donglu was defeated by a woman. TSK, he was humiliated by a woman and lost miserably. Just thinking about his expression at the time, I can laugh at him for a year." As soon as they heard this, everyone became interested and asked, "A woman? Who is it?" At this time, Bai Wuji suddenly kept them in suspense. "I won't spread this gossip. It's meaningless. You guys will know when you go back to Yendong and ask around. By the way, Fang Huai, you are in Yannan. Do you know who the Divine Force sect sent? Also, Yan Shi is in Huangfu clan, and your Fang clan is also quite close to the Huangfu clan. Haven't you heard anything?" Fang Huai shook his head and said, "I don't know about the Huangfu clan. They are a big clan with thousands of years of inheritance, so they naturally don't want to deal with a small family like us. The Divine Force sect probably won't send anyone here. This generation of the Divine Force sect doesn't even have a martial artist on the Longhu list. After all, the history of the Divine Force sect is too short. Although the Yan clan master of Yan Huainan is very powerful and is an overlord, there are no outstanding people in the entire Divine Force sect. They will only come to watch the show. Bai Wuji nodded. While everyone was chatting, they saw a servant rush up and say loudly, "My lord, a young talent came to the Guanzhong torture room." He directly forced Cha Kuei to admit defeat with his aura. In a few dozen breaths, he defeated Mr. Xiao Ting with a swift blade against a swift sword. Chapter 216. The attendant's shout immediately attracted the attention of the young talents on the 7th floor. Amongst the people present, there were quite a few who were ranked on the Longhu leaderboard. Even if some of them weren't ranked on the Longhu leaderboard, they were figures with decent strength in the younger generation like Fang Huai. Chu Xiu's battle accomplishments didn't attract too much of their attention, and it only caused them to be slightly surprised. What really attracted their attention was Chu Xiu's identity as a member of the Guanzhong torture room. The Guanzhong torture room was in existence between the imperial court and the pugilistic world. However, because they didn't interfere with the affairs of the pugilistic world, the people present didn't have a good impression of the Guanzhong torture room, but they didn't have a bad impression either. It could only be said that their impression was very vague. In the past, the Guanzhong torture room kept a very low profile and almost never left Guanzhong. However, now the Guanzhong torture room had sent someone to participate in the God Weapon Conference. Did this mean that the Guanzhong torture room was also ready to interfere with the affairs of the pugilistic world? Moreover, the people present were also very curious about who the Guanzhong torture room had sent. They had never heard of any outstanding young talents from the Guanzhong torture room. At this time, two people walked down from the 8th floor of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion. One of them was in his 40s and wore a purple official robe. His face was square and imposing and he didn't look like an ordinary person. This person was Prince Anil, Jiang Wenyuan. The person beside Jiang Wenyuan was an ordinary middle-aged man in a black robe. His appearance was ordinary, and his aura was restrained to the extreme. Bystanders would not be able to see anything wrong with him. He was definitely the kind of person that would be hard to find in a crowd. However, since he could sit on the 8th floor and was personally received by Jiang Wenyuan, one could imagine what kind of status this person had. Walking down the stairs, the young talents present all stood up and saluted Jiang Wenyuan, "Your Highness." The previous generation of the imperial family, the Prince of Eastern Qi, and Jiang Wenyuan already had so many martial artists under him. Although the forces behind these young talents were also very strong, they still had to salute in front of Jiang Wenyuan respectfully. Jiang Wenyuan greeted the crowd amiably, but he scolded the attendant with a gloomy face, "Why are you making a fuss? Have you forgotten the rules?" The attendant quickly lowered his head and said, "Please forgive me, Your Highness. Young Master Chu from the Guanzhong torture room is currently challenging the 7th floor. Should we allow him to skip this step and come up directly?" The gatekeeper of the 7th floor was a little strong. The other 2 floors were guarded by the king and Lu estate's hanger-ons, but the gatekeeper of the 7th floor was a consecrator of the king and Lu estate. The former were essentially Jiang Wenyuan's subordinates, making a living under him. On the other hand, the latter was invited by Jiang Wenyuan, so Jiang Wenyuan had to treat him respectfully, fearing that he would leave. By arranging such a person on the 7th floor, if the person who came was someone from a force that was hostile to Jiang Wenyuan, he would directly order the other party to deal with him ruthlessly. If it was an ordinary guest, then he would just probe them normally. Moreover, if the person who came was someone that Jiang Wenyuan thought was valuable, he would personally go down to the 7th level and invite the person up. There was no need for him to challenge the level. This would also indirectly give the other party face and gain their favor. Bai Wuji was like this, he didn't even attempt to challenge a single level. His identity as someone from the drifting snow city was already sufficient, but the moment he arrived at the 1st level, he was recognized by someone and directly informed Jiang Wenyuan to invite him up. As for Fang Huai, he came together with Bai Wuji, so Jiang Wenyuan didn't make things difficult for him. He instructed the hanger-ons and hanger-ons to show some mercy, causing Feng Huai to expend some energy, but he still successfully stepped into the 7th floor. Hearing the attendant's question, Jiang Wenyuan thought about it and said, "There's no need, let him pass the 7th floor and come up himself." A look of astonishment flashed in the eyes of the attendant. An outstanding cultivator from the Guanzhong torture room was also so strong, yet His Highness actually didn't invite him? This wasn't His Highness's character. Although he said this, the attendant still obediently left, not daring to ask any more questions. The middle-aged man beside Jiang Wenyuan suddenly spoke in a strange, deep voice. In the past few decades, the Guanzhong torture room rarely stepped foot in the martial world. Normally, Your Highness couldn't even rope them in even if you wanted to. Now that the Guanzhong torture room finally sent someone out, why didn't Your Highness try to rope them in? Jiang Wenyuan said indifferently, "Rope them in? Why didn't I rope them in?" In the past, when Guan Siyu revived the Guanzhong torture room, he often came to the Three Kingdoms to seek an audience with the various rulers, all for the sake of getting the Three Kingdoms to acknowledge the status of the Guanzhong torture room. At that time, I tried to rope Guan Siyu in. I could give him money to help him stabilize the internal affairs of the Guanzhong torture room, and I could also use my status in the Qi Kingdom to put in a good word for him. In the end, that idiot Guan Siyu rejected me without even thinking and even said that I had the ambition of a wolf. He simply didn't want the face I gave him. At this point, Jiang Wenyuan's expression had already turned somewhat ugly. In the past, he was also young and impetuous. When he saw that Guan Siyu had come to the Qi Kingdom to ask for help, he began to persuade and tempt him. He wanted Guan Siyu and even the entire Guanzhong torture room to side with him. In the end, he was humiliated by Guan Siyu. This was something that Jiang Wenyuan would never forget for the rest of his life. Now that a junior from the Guanzhong torture room had come to the Qi Kingdom, it was already very magnanimous of him not to cause trouble in secret. What kind of joke was he trying to rope him in? Based on Guan Siyu's stubborn attitude, no one could think of roping in the people from the Guanzhong torture room. The middle-aged man next to Jiang Wenyuan couldn't help but laugh coldly when he saw Jiang Wenyuan's expression. This King Anil of Eastern Qi really had great ambitions but little talent. He looked magnanimous, but in reality, he didn't have the slightest tolerance for others. When did Guan Siyu come to the Qi Kingdom to discuss the status of the Guanzhong torture room? It was more than 20 years ago. Guan Siyu had already successfully taken over the position of Hall Master. She was also a Grandmaster who had condensed the martial path true core. As the Hall Master of the Guanzhong torture room, she was also an overlord. What about Jiang Wenyuan back then? He had just taken over the position of Prince of Ease. He was just a young man who only knew how to talk and seemed ambitious. Did such a person deserve to rope in Guan Siyu? He also wanted the Guanzhong torture room to side with him. He was simply overestimating himself. Not to mention Guan Siyu, any normal person would not agree to it. However, at the moment, he was still working with Jiang Wenyuan. Therefore, the middle-aged man only chuckled and said, "It was a pity that Guan Siyu rejected you back then. Otherwise, the Guanzhong torture room wouldn't have been quiet for so long. Now, it has finally stabilized and begun to set foot in the underworld." Jiang Wenyuan snorted lightly and said, "I want to see what kind of people Guan Siyu has cultivated over the years. Can they compare with the talents of the Qi Kingdom? I didn't instruct Uncle Qi to be merciful. If the martial artist from the Guanzhong torture room can't pass Uncle Qi, then it can only be said that he is not strong enough." The middle-aged man couldn't help but shake his head. Jiang Wenyuan is really narrow-minded. Under normal circumstances, Jiang Wenyuan's elder, Uncle Qi, would be merciful to the young talents who came to challenge the level. However, if he went all out, even some of the talents in the top 20 of the Longhu list might not be able to resist him. This was because Uncle Qi was a great master in the unity of man and nature realm at his peak. However, he fell to the physical invulnerability realm because he encountered some problems when trying to break through to the martial path real core realm. At this time, at the entrance of the 7th floor, Chu Xiu also saw the gatekeeper of the last floor. It was somewhat beyond his expectations. It turned out to be an old man with snow-white hair and a face full of wrinkles. He sat there with his eyes slightly closed as if he was about to enter the grave. At this time, when he saw the attendant bring Chu Xiu over, Uncle Chi opened his eyes and muttered, "Someone came to challenge the 7th floor again? Seriously, this god weapon conference has caused this old man so much trouble. Your Highness should be more magnanimous and directly invite all these young people up. Why do you have to compete with an old man like me?" As he spoke, Uncle Chi slowly sat up from his small stool. At this time, the attendant upstairs also came down. Uncle Chi glanced at the attendant and revealed a questioning look. However, the attendant shook his head, indicating that Uncle Chi didn't need to go easy. This made Uncle Chi very surprised. He knew his master's personality. If a martial artist that could reach the 7th floor was too old, then so be it. But generally speaking, a young martial artist's potential should be quite good, and it would be worth his master roping him in. Why was his master telling him not to go easy on him? Wasn't this the same as driving away a young talent? However, Uncle Chi didn't think too much about it. He was getting old, and it was tiring to think too much. Anyway, he was indebted to His Highness. Since he was allowed to retire here, he would do whatever His Highness said. Hence, Uncle Chi directly said to Chu Xiu, "Young man, my rules are very simple. I will only attack for 100 breaths of time. If you can persist for 100 breaths of time without losing, then you can ascend to the 7th floor." In the eyes of others, 100 breaths of time was very short. In the time it took to say a few words, it would already be 100 breaths of time. However, to martial artists, those who were faster could exchange dozens of moves within 100 breaths of time. Just like when Chu Xiu was fighting with Xiao Ting, he could slash out hundreds of sword chi and saber shadows in an instant. His speed was simply astonishing. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "If it's just not losing, then it is indeed very simple." Uncle Chi grinned. Although he was frighteningly old, his teeth were like those of a young man. They were neat and snow-white, without any missing parts. It is a good thing for young people to be impetuous. However, since this old man was arranged by his lord to guard the 7th floor, he must have some ability. "Young man, be careful." As his voice fell, Uncle Chi directly took a step forward and punched out at the same time. Just this step was like a qilin shaking the ground, causing the entire hall of the 7th floor to tremble. As this punch landed, it also brought with it the roar of a dragon and the roar of a tiger. The astral energy turned into a storm that swept out with unparalleled power. Before he attacked, Uncle Chi was just an old man with one foot in the grave. However, when he attacked, this old man who was about to die seemed to have transformed into a terrifying demon god. Chapter 217. Uncle Chi was a skinny old man who looked like he was on the brink of death. For him to suddenly unleash such a level of power was very terrifying. Even Chu Xiu did not expect this. When this punch landed, it even gave Chu Xiu a great deal of pressure. Most importantly, Chu Xiu felt a trace of aura from Uncle Chi's body. It was an aura that definitely did not belong to a physical invulnerability realm martial artist. Chu Xiu had seen many experts in the unity of heaven and man realm. In fact, he had even fought with the heavenly sin branch leader before. He was very sensitive to the aura of experts in this realm. Experts in this realm were strong because they had already reached a level where they could comprehend the heavens and earth. Their essence, chi, and spirit would condense and fuse with the heavens and earth. When they attacked, their strength would integrate with the surrounding environment. Although they could not reach the level of borrowing the power of the heavens and earth, they could borrow the power of the heavens and earth. Right now, Uncle Chi gave Chu Xiu this feeling. Under this punch, it was vast and majestic. It was as though the entire heavens and earth had merged into his fist. He was clearly a physical invulnerability realm martial artist, but when he attacked, he had the aura of an expert in the unity of heaven and man realm. This was really strange. However, at this time, Chu Xiu did not care about whether it was strange or not. On the contrary, a hint of fighting spirit surged in his body. Only when there was pressure would there be motivation. In the past, Chu Xiu's opponents were too weak. Almost no one could give Chu Xiu pressure. In the Guanzhong torture room, it was difficult for martial artists of the same level to make a difference. Even when he faced Lin Kaiyun, who was also on the Longhu list, Chu Xiu could still crush him. But now, this Uncle Chi in front of Chu Xiu was strong enough. He was strong enough to make Chu Xiu feel heavy pressure. With a loud explosion, Chu Xiu circulated the great primordial chaos art of heaven and earth to the extreme. His aura was majestic and vast, like the beginning of the primordial chaos, incomparably powerful. At that moment, the powerful foundation that Chu Xiu displayed shocked even Uncle Chi. This kind of powerful inner force foundation had already surpassed 99% of the physical invulnerability realm martial artists. Even some of the three-flower realm martial artists couldn't compare to Chu Xiu. Facing Uncle Chi's punch, Chu Xiu's hands formed the great UnparalleledSwordWill seal. In an instant, a blinding Buddhist light bloomed. The Vajra suppressed the world, destroying all evil and subduing demons. The incomparably ferocious great UnparalleledSwordWill seal collided with Uncle Chi's fist that carried the roar of a tiger and the roar of a dragon. In an instant, the entire dragon assembling pavilion seemed to shake, emitting a violent explosion of astral energy. This vibration was not only felt by the 6th floor, but even the 7th floor could feel it. Jiang Wenyuan's expression changed slightly. Although his strength was very weak, he had many experts under him, so he had good eyesight. According to his expectations, Uncle Chi should have completely crushed the young man from the Guanzhong torture room. In the end, it caused a vibration of this level. What did this mean? It meant that both sides were evenly matched. The middle-aged man beside Jiang Wenyuan chuckled and said, "Your Highness, it seems that the person sent by the Guanzhong torture room is not ordinary. Do you regret not recruiting him? If you can recruit such a talent, even if he has to leave the Guanzhong torture room, as long as he himself is able to do so, it will be worth it." Jiang Wenyuan snorted coldly and said, "Whose side are you on? I know Uncle Chi's strength. How many of the younger generation can beat him? Perhaps this junior from the Guanzhong torture room is proficient in martial arts with explosive power, which is why he can barely exchange a blow with Uncle Chi." As Jiang Wenyuan spoke, intense explosions of astral energy came from below, one after another. It shook the entire dragon assembling pavilion to the point that they no longer had the mood to eat. All of them looked up with astonishment. The black-clothed middle-aged man looked at Jiang Wenyuan with an expression that was not a smile. His words had just been refuted by the facts. This was really a slap in the face. And at this moment, Uncle Chi's expression was also very grave. Just now, when Chu Xiu used the great UnparalleledSwordWill seal to clash with his fist, the result was that he had the upper hand. He did not take a step back, but Chu Xiu had taken 3 steps back. Even so, he was still astonished by Chu Xiu's strength. At this moment, Chu Xiu, who had taken 3 steps back, seemed to not feel anything. Immediately after, he pressed forward again. Palm techniques like the great UnparalleledSwordWill seal and the great violet sun hand of extinguishing the heavens and extinguishing the earth were blasted out one after another. He actually fought Uncle Chi to a stalemate. This caused Uncle Chi to be shocked. Where did this monster come from? Not only was Chu Xiu's great UnparalleledSwordWill seal powerful, but the great violet sun hand of extinguishing the heavens and extinguishing the earth was also incomparably strange. When the purple sun devil flame entered his body, Uncle Chi's own inner strength was strong. He could directly force the purple sun devil flame out, but every time he did so, he would have to expend a portion of his inner strength and energy. In the long run, the amount of inner strength and energy he consumed would increase, and it would be easier for Chu Xiu to take advantage of it. Both sides exchanged dozens of blows. 100 breaths of time had already passed, but no one had any intention of stopping. Uncle Chi was also really angered. He was a senior in the pugilistic world and was a great expert at the unity of heaven and man realm in the past. Jiang Wenyuan had arranged for him to guard the last level here. In fact, most of the time, he was letting the fight go. He would then stand from the perspective of a senior and give pointers to the other party. Those juniors would naturally thank him respectfully. Of course, this was not Uncle Chi taking advantage of his seniority. When he was at his peak, he had already taken half a step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Naturally, he was qualified to give pointers to these junior warriors. In the end, he was evenly matched with a junior warrior like Chu Xiu. This also put Uncle Chi in a difficult position. A solemn look appeared on Uncle Chi's old face. His originally somewhat turbid eyes also revealed a bright sharpness. The earth energy around him condensed in his palms, and he suddenly pushed them forward. In an instant, the earth energy seemed to condense into a huge mountain. It was extremely heavy and majestic. At this moment, Uncle Chi also formed a fist seal with both hands. As the huge mountain of earth energy came crashing down on Chu Xiu, the powerful earth energy and pressure instantly sealed Chu Xiu in this space, making it impossible for him to dodge or hide. Move mountains and fill seas. After all, Uncle Chi was a great expert at the unity of heaven and man realm in the past. In terms of the application of power, he far surpassed Chu Xiu. When this mountain-like fist seal landed, it really had the charm of moving mountains and filling seas. It was incomparably majestic, and the powerful pressure stimulated Chu Xiu's fighting spirit to the extreme. Black mist lingered on the red sleeve saber. This was the first time Chu Xiu had used his saber. Previously, he had been using his own fist technique to resist Uncle Chi. It was also somewhat intended to hone his own realm strength. Now that he was facing Uncle Chi's fist seal, Chu Xiu was not confident that he could withstand it if he did not explode with his strongest power. Boundless hatred and death chi coiled around Chu Xiu's saber, Chu Xiu's arm, and even his eyes. The three sabers of Avicii suddenly slashed out. It was as if the gates of hell had appeared, and a shocking death chi suddenly erupted. This time, Chu Xiu directly used the second saber of the three sabers of Avicii to resist Uncle Chi's attack. After seeing Chu Xiu's saber slash out, everyone present had a look of horror in their eyes. Even a blind person could see that this saber was a standard demonic cultivation method. It was incomparably evil. Even the shocking hatred and death chi could affect them, causing their negative emotions to erupt. This kind of terrifying demonic saber did not seem like something an ordinary person would cultivate. If Chu Xiu had not already made his identity clear, that he was a member of the Guanzhong torture room, it was likely that all the martial artists present would have easily swarmed forward to eliminate the demon and defend justice. At this moment, the moment Chu Xiu slashed out with his saber, the middle-aged man beside Jiang Wenyuan on the 7th floor also revealed a strange look. He had not seen such a pure and terrifying demonic aura for a long time. Who was this person? Had the Guanzhong torture room already begun to take in demonic cultivators? The three sabers of Avicii clashed with Uncle Chi's moving mountains and filling seas. The powerful saber aura contained surging hatred, and demonic aura tore through everything. Shattering mountains. Withering seas. Nirvana energy. A look of horror appeared in Uncle Chi's eyes. Golden nirvana energy bloomed between his hands. He formed a swastika seal with his hands and struck out continuously. Only then did he finally counteract the saber aura of Chu Xiu's three sabers of Avicii. This Buddhist seal was something he had learned from an old monk from a small temple when he was traveling the pugilistic world when he was young. Its power was limited against ordinary people, but it was very effective against martial artists who cultivated demonic cultivation methods. In the end, when faced with Chu Xiu's 3 sabers of Avicii, he had to use several Buddhist seals to block it. One could imagine how powerful Chu Xiu's saber was. Looking at Chu Xiu, whose eyes were still filled with monstrous demonic aura, Uncle Chi laughed bitterly and said, "Let's not fight anymore. Young master, please head up to the 7th level." Chu Xiu stood on the spot and did not move. He only formed the inner lion seal with his hands and used the power of the 9 words formula to suppress the backlash of the 3 sabers of Avicii. Actually, the outcome of the battle was still undecided. However, Uncle Chi did not wish to continue fighting. He had roamed the pugilistic world all his life. Of course, he still had trump cards in his hands. However, he did not intend to use them now. Since Chu Xiu had come to the Dragon Assembly Pavilion, no matter what his identity was, he was just a guest. To put it bluntly, Uncle Chi was just a doorkeeper. Could he really fight to the death with Chu Xiu here? If he continued fighting and lost or fell into a disadvantageous position, he would lose all his face. At this moment, the other martial artists present were also looking at Chu Xiu in shock. They were considered frequent customers of the Dragon Assembly Pavilion. Naturally, they had seen many people fight with Uncle Chi. Some of them had even tried to go up to the 7th level before. In the end, most of them could not even take 3 moves from Uncle Chi. However, this Chu Xiu before them could fight with Uncle Chi to such a level. He even forced Uncle Chi to take a step back. This kind of strength was definitely something that they could only look up to. The demonic aura in Chu Xiu's eyes dissipated. He squinted at Uncle Chi and said, "Would still like to exchange a few moves with you, old senior." Uncle Chi said indifferently, "I'm already old. I don't have the mood to continue fighting. Those true young elites upstairs should be your opponents, young master." Chapter 218. On the 7th floor of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, everyone was looking at the entrance, wanting to see what kind of person was able to fight evenly with Uncle Chi. Although they didn't go down to watch, just by feeling the shockwaves from the fight, they could imagine the scene. It was absolutely intense. Some of these people had fought with Uncle Chi before. They were not stupid, and they could guess that Uncle Chi had gone easy on them when they fought. Even so, they had used a lot of strength to last for more than 100 breaths. Yet, the person below was able to fight with Uncle Chi to this extent. How strong was he? At this time, at Bai Wuji's table, Fang Hui asked in a low voice, "Brother Bai, if you fought with Uncle Chi, would you be able to fight as well as this person?" Bai Wuji's face was a little uncertain. After a long while, he said, "I haven't fought with Uncle Chi, how can I be sure? Moreover, if we really fight, I can't kill him, I can't use some of the northern floating snow city's secret techniques. If it's not a life and death battle, it's very difficult to determine a winner." Everyone secretly glanced at Bai Wuji. His words didn't seem to match his heart. Even if they hadn't seen pork, they had seen pigs run. The 2 people below didn't fight to the death, didn't they still see their strength? However, none of them had low EQ to expose Bai Wuji. They were all looking down to see who it was that had come down. A moment later, Chu Xiu stepped into the 7th floor, wearing a black robe, black iron hat, and a red saber scabbard hanging on his waist, giving off a very evil feeling. Eastern Qi and West Chu's cultivators looked at each other. Who was this person? He looked unfamiliar. Could it be that this person had been trained by the Guanzhong torture room since he was a child, and had never stepped out into the world? But at this time, Bai Wuji's eyes showed a trace of horror, mixed with a hint of anger. He suddenly stood up, slammed the table, and said coldly, "Chu Xiu. It's you." Chu Xiu looked up and saw Bai Wuji. He couldn't help but smile. so it's brother Bai, long time no see, how are you? Bai Wuji stared at Chu Xiu, his eyes showing a complicated look. In fact, there was no direct hatred between him and Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had tricked him during the treasure hunt at Liu Yangshan, but Nie Donglu had also been tricked. Compared to Chu Xiu taking away the treasure, Bai Wuji was more interested in seeing Nie Donglu suffer. And after that, Chu Xiu snatched away the blood jade necklace from the hands of the Driftsnow cities by clan and the Morgue village. Bai Wuji had also heard of this, but he didn't feel anything. In any case, Chu Xiu didn't snatch it from his hands. What really made Bai Wuji and Chu Xiu hate each other was the Tiger and Dragon list ranking. It was a small list, but it involved their reputation and face. How many people in the Jianghu could really be indifferent to fame and wealth? On the Tiger and Dragon list, Bai Wuji was ranked 18th. Bai Wuji was quite satisfied with this position. After all, his cultivation was not very high at that time, he was still in the northern Yan martial world. It was not easy for him to fight all the way to his current position. But Chu Xiu obviously didn't fight as many times as him, but wind-sweeping tower made Chu Xiu take his position. How could Bai Wuji tolerate this? Although the truth was that there was some friction between the floating snow city and wind-sweeping tower in the northern Yan martial world, wind-sweeping tower used Chu Xiu's ranking to annoy the floating snow city. But in the eyes of the outside world, it must be that Bai Wuji was inferior to Chu Xiu, which was why he was pushed down from the Tiger and Dragon list. The people in the floating snow city all knew about this, but they didn't say anything. But the discussion of outsiders had made Bai Wuji angry for a long time. Bai Wuji looked at Chu Xiu and sneered, "I'm fine, but I heard that you were chased like a stray dog by my floating snow city. I thought you were dead, but I didn't expect that you're still alive. And from an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society, you became a member of the Guanzhong torture room. Don't tell me you're an imposter." Hearing Bai Wuji's words, the people at his table finally realized who Chu Xiu was. After all, Chu Xiu was quite famous in the east of Yan. The gold medal assassin of the Blue Dragon Society was cunning and cruel. Especially when he set up a trap to destroy the Yu clan of the Northern Mountain, it made the East Yan pugilistic world recognize the killing methods of the Blue Dragon Society. Not only could they kill with knives, they could also kill with human hearts. But after the incident with the blood jade crystal, Chu Xiu left the East Yan for more than a year. This was too long for the pugilistic world. Even the leader of the Heavenly Sin branch had changed. Naturally, Chu Xiu had been forgotten. Until Bai Wuji said this, they finally realized who Chu Xiu was. It was the same for the others. There were only a few names on the Longhu leaderboard. Thinking of Chu Xiu's name and his background in the Blue Dragon Society, it was easy to guess his identity. Chu Xiu said lightly, "You don't have to worry about whether I'm a fake or not. Oh right, speaking of which, I have to thank the people of the fluttering snow city of the far north. Liu Yangshan's treasures were given to me by you, and the blood jade crystal was given to me by the elders of the Bai clan. Now that I'm ranked 18th on the Longhu leaderboard, it's all thanks to the support and help of the fluttering snow city of the far north." Hearing this, Bai Wuji's face immediately showed a hint of anger. He pointed at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Chu Xiu, don't think that just because you're ranked above me, you can really challenge me. Don't think that just because you joined the Guanzhong torture room, you can look down on the fluttering snow city of the far north." Chu Xiu shrugged and said, "Bai Wuji, you know what's going on with the rankings on the Longhu leaderboard. If you're not satisfied, you can go and reason with the wind-sweeping tower. If you can make the wind-sweeping tower lower their head and put you in the first place, I don't care. People of the pugilistic world fight for fame and fortune. The wind-sweeping tower's Longhu leaderboard is just for an idiot like you. Of course, if you really want to compete with me, then I'll accompany you to the end. It just so happens that I haven't had a good fight yet, why don't we have a round?" The cultivators from the drifting snow city of the extreme north were naturally arrogant and irritable. When he heard Chu Xiu's words, Bai Wuji immediately grabbed the silver spear Chu Xiu had placed beside him and was about to attack, but he was held back by Fang Huai who was beside him. "Brother Bai. Calm down. This is Eastern Qi, this is the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. The God Weapon Conference hasn't started yet, there's no need to rush." At this time, Jiang Wenyuan also suddenly spoke, "All right, young people have a short temper, it's enough to say a few words. Don't tell me you really want to tear down this prince's Dragon Gatherer Pavilion?" The servant behind Chu Xiu also hurriedly said to Chu Xiu, "Young Master Chu, this is our prince." When Bai Wuji heard Jiang Wenyuan speak, he also didn't want to offend a local tyrant like Jiang Wenyuan, so he could only coldly snort without saying a word. Chu Xiu looked at Jiang Wenyuan with a strange expression, cupped his hands, and said, "Greetings, Prince." At this time, Jiang Wenyuan's expression was no longer as cold as before. He patted Chu Xiu's shoulder and said, "Not bad, there are many people who can pass through the third floor of my Dragon Gatherer Pavilion, but not many can do it to your level. Guan Siyu can be considered very lucky to be able to drag you into the Guanzhong torture room." At this time, Jiang Wenyuan didn't know that he was looking at an outstanding junior with a kind expression, but there was only one thought in Chu Xiu's mind. This good-looking and imposing fellow was the idiot who persistently courted death. In Chu Xiu's mind, everything that Jiang Wenyuan did was courting death. Instead of being a prince in peace, he had to jump out and stir up trouble. Regardless of whether it was roping in the powers of the martial world, making friends with the young talents and masters of the Jianghu, or recruiting large numbers of warriors to be his retainers, these actions were simply seeking death. They challenged the nerves of the Dongqi royal family time and time again. When the people of the Eastern Qi royal family had enough and didn't want this memorial archway, then Jiang Wenyuan's life would come to an end. But now Jiang Wenyuan was still alive and well, and this was also the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion, so Chu Xiu also pretended to be flattered and said, "Prince, you flatter me. I can have this status in the Guanzhong torture room because of Hall Leader Guan's promotion." At this time, Jiang Wenyuan suddenly narrowed his eyes and said, "But I feel that Guan Siyu's promotion is not enough." Chu Xiu was surprised and said, "What do you mean, Prince?" Jiang Wenyuan suddenly laughed and said, "Chu has just come to Eastern Qi, and this is also the first time he has come to the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. As the host, I naturally have to entertain you personally. It's a good opportunity for you to taste the specialties of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion." As he said this, Jiang Wenyuan directly pulled Chu Xiu to a corner on the 7th floor by the window and ordered people to arrange for the dishes to be served. At this time, Jiang Wenyuan walked back and said to the black-robed middle-aged man beside him, "Mr. Lu, let's stop here for today. We'll talk another day." Mr. Lu glanced at Jiang Wenyuan and said with a laugh, "I understand. I wish Prince success." Their words were like clouds in the clouds, and some people didn't understand. Only Mr. Lu and Jiang Wenyuan understood the meaning. Earlier, Jiang Wenyuan had told Mr. Lu about the enmity between him, Guan Siyu, and the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall. Of course, this was only a one-sided enmity for Jiang Wenyuan, and Guan Siyu had probably forgotten about it a long time ago. However, with Jiang Wenyuan's character, he was not prepared to treat Chu Xiu nicely, nor did he have the intention to recruit him. And just now, he found out that Chu Xiu was not a martial artist trained by the Guanzhong torture room. Before this, he was already in the top 20 of the Longhu list. He had only joined the Guanzhong torture room for less than 2 years, so the meaning of this was different. In such a short time, it was impossible for Chu Xiu to have much loyalty to the Guanzhong torture room. However, he could try to recruit him. While he obtained a young expert, he could also annoy Guan Siyu. Chapter 219. After Jiang Wenyuan found out about Chu Xiu's identity, he really wanted to recruit Chu Xiu. He didn't simply want to make friends with him. Instead, he wanted to recruit Chu Xiu as his subordinate and make him work for him. In all fairness, Jiang Wenyuan's subordinates were not weak. Over the years, he had relied on his identity as the king of peace and happiness, as well as his generosity, to recruit many martial artists as his followers. There were even great experts at the unity of heaven and man realm among them. However, there wasn't anyone like Chu Xiu who could stand out among the younger generation. An expert of the younger generation like Chu Xiu represented potential. If he were to be recruited, Chu Xiu's future achievements might not be inferior to those great experts who were one with the world. However, the price he would have to pay would be much lower. Moreover, it wasn't just potential. It also represented the strength of Jiang Wenyuan's subordinates, the Prince of Anlu residents. In addition to having a leader, any faction needed a powerhouse who could suppress the entire faction, a large number of capable core forces, and outstanding young disciples. Only then could it be considered a faction with unlimited potential. Jiang Wenyuan was ambitious. Naturally, he was developing in this direction. Over the years, he had recruited many high-level martial artists. There were also quite a few mid-tier martial artists like Xiao Ting who had decent strength. However, he didn't have any outstanding young martial artists. Most of the young elites on the Longhu list were from aristocratic families or large sections. They could maintain a good relationship with Jiang Wenyuan, but they definitely wouldn't be loyal to him. Now that he had finally seen Chu Xiu and found out that he wasn't a disciple that had been nurtured by the Guanzhong torture room since he was young, Jiang Wenyuan naturally wanted to poach him. In the past, Guan Siyu had dared to make him lose face. Today, he was going to poach Guan Siyu. After Chu Xiu and Jiang Wenyuan took their seats, the other young elites on the 7th floor looked at Jiang Wenyuan in confusion. They didn't know why Jiang Wenyuan was giving Chu Xiu so much face. It must be known that with Jiang Wenyuan's status, there were countless young talents that came and went to the Dragon Gathering Pavilion these days, but those that were able to receive Jiang Wenyuan's personal reception were as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. What did Chu Xiu have to deserve such treatment from Jiang Wenyuan? Even Bai Wuji's expression was gloomy. Even he didn't receive such treatment. When he first arrived at the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, Jiang Wenyuan was very courteous and even personally welcomed him to the 7th floor. However, he didn't personally set up a banquet to receive him. After a while, a group of maids brought out the wine and dishes. It had to be said that the wine and dishes made by the Dragon Gathering Pavilion were very attractive. It could be said that they looked, smelled, and tasted great. There was also a faint but powerful spiritual energy floating around them. Jiang Wenyuan personally poured a cup of fragrant, amber wine for Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "In the wild mountains of West Chu, there was a rumor that some wild monkeys picked 100 fruits in a tree hole to store food for the winter. However, if there was no lack of food for the winter, the monkeys would forget about the fruits they stored. Then the fruits in the tree hole would gradually ferment and become 100-fruit wine, so it was called the monkey wine. Moreover, these wild monkeys don't know any treasures and will pick some rare spiritual fruits as if they were normal fruits. This causes the monkey wine to contain a shocking amount of medicinal energy. There were some cultivators who went to the wild mountains to pick herbs and accidentally found this monkey wine. After drinking it, they found that their cultivation base increased greatly. Chu Xiu said in a surprised voice, "This is the monkey wine you found in West Chu?" Jiang Wenyuan shook his head and said, "This monkey wine is something that can only be found by chance, it is too coincidental. Moreover, there is only a small amount of medicinal energy in the monkey wine, but my monkey wine is made from precious spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits. Its medicinal energy is even stronger than the authentic monkey wine. If Chu doesn't believe me, you can have a taste." Chu Xiu drank a mouthful of the wine in the cup. Instantly, he felt a wave of heat seeping into his body from the wine liquid. This cup of wine was actually more powerful than a 5th Revolution Dan. It really is a treasure. Your Highness Dragon Gathering Pavilion truly lives up to its name. Chu Xiu gave a sigh of praise. Jiang Wenyuan gave a proud smile and pointed at the dishes on the table as he said, Chu, you should also have a taste of these dishes. There aren't many dishes on the 7th floor, but each one is a treasure. They must be personally approved by me before they can be served. For example, this Return of the Phoenix's Nest is made from a Snow Ridge guinea fowl that has been fed with spirit herbs for more than 3 months. The phoenix nest below is also made from the bird's nest of the golden silk snow swallow in the extreme north of the northern swallow. Chu Xiu nodded and was not polite as he tasted the dishes one by one. Jiang Wenyuan really wasn't bragging, each one was a treasure. After eating for a while, Jiang Wenyuan suddenly asked, Chu is from the Blue Dragon Society. Why did you join the Guanzhong torture room in the end? Chu Xiu said indifferently, a branch leader of the Blue Dragon Society wanted to use me as a tool. I naturally wouldn't be willing to be used, so I betrayed them and escaped. Coincidentally, I met the Guanzhong hero, Chu Yuansheng, who was being chased. I saved him in passing and was then recommended by Hero Chu to be a patrol envoy in Guanzhong. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Jiang Wenyuan's eyes immediately lit up. If this was the case, then it would be easier for him to recruit Chu Xiu. Originally, he thought that it was Guan Siyu who saved Chu Xiu, or that he had personally recruited Chu Xiu to join the Guanzhong torture room. He didn't expect that it was Chu Xiu who saved Chu Yuansheng and accidentally joined the Guanzhong torture room. There was no debt of gratitude between the two. Jiang Wenyuan played with the wine glass in his hand and suddenly asked, Chu, you've been in the Guanzhong torture room for a while now. What do you think of the Guanzhong torture room? Chu Xiu was a little confused as to why Jiang Wenyuan would ask him this. However, Chu Xiu naturally wouldn't say that the Guanzhong torture room looked harmonious and stable on the surface, but there were many contradictions on the inside. He only said in a low voice, under the leadership of Hallmaster Guan, the Guanzhong torture room established itself between the 3 countries and developed the Guanzhong torture room into such a prosperous place. Of course, it's a blessing for the warriors of my generation in the Guanzhong torture room. In other sects, disciples like me, who don't have a good background might be picked on and suppressed. However, in the Guanzhong torture room, everything is done according to the rules of merit. At least, it's fair. Jiang Wenyuan smiled and said, what you said is the truth. Guan Siyu isn't good in other things, but she's very impartial. She doesn't even care about her own disciple. However, I feel that Chu, developing in the Guanzhong torture room isn't a good thing. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and asked, why? Jiang Wenyuan lowered his voice and said in a low voice, it's because the Guanzhong torture room is too fair. That's why talented young warriors like you don't have any preferential treatment. You should know that the younger a warrior is when they step into the next realm, the greater their potential in the future. For example, Chu, at your age, you need a large amount of resources and elixirs to cultivate. If you delay your efforts, you will be left behind by the young talents on the Longhu list. But no matter how great your potential is, the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall still gives you a salary based on your position, and the amount is pitifully low. Young friend Chu, you should have a deep understanding of this. Chu Xiu rubbed his head. They seemed to have vaguely guessed what Jiang Wenyuan meant. However, Chu Xiu still put on a puzzled expression and said, you're slandering the Guanzhong torture room in front of me. What do you mean, Your Highness? Jiang Wenyuan snorted coldly and said, I'm not slandering you. I'm just stating the truth. I know Guan Siyu's character very well. No matter how outstanding your performance in the Guanzhong torture room is, you won't get any preferential treatment. He treats his disciple like this, let alone you. Moreover, the development of the Guanzhong area is limited. It's in the middle of 3 countries. It's like walking on thin ice. It's fine when the 3 countries stop fighting. If the 3 countries continue to fight, what will the Guanzhong torture room do? Chu, you're able to rank in the top 20 of the Longhu list at such a young age without relying on a sect. This is enough to prove your potential. As the saying goes, a good bird chooses a tree to nest in. You have to consider your own future. Don't waste your potential. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. Only now did he understand what Jiang Wenyuan meant. However, Chu Xiu didn't say it out loud. He only said in a low voice, "Your Highness, what do you mean?" Jiang Wenyuan waved his hand and said in a low voice, "A straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush. Chu, you're able to represent the Guanzhong torture room to participate in the God Weapon Conference and meet me here. This is fate. Since you're here at the Dragon Assembling Pavilion, you should have some understanding of me. I cherish talents the most, especially talents like you, Chu. Now that I have retainers and consecrators, if Chu is willing to join me, then I, Chu, will be the third type of person. Although I won't be a consecrator, I'll be treated better than one. Furthermore, I won't have to fight every day like a retainer. I guarantee that my prince's residents of Anlu will do our best to nurture you, Chu. Chu, what you can get will definitely be much better than what you can get in the Guanzhong torture room." Chu Xiu looked at Jiang Wenyuan with a slightly astonished gaze. He had not expected Jiang Wenyuan to be so direct, promising great benefits to recruit him on their first meeting. Furthermore, Chu Xiu had to admit that what Jiang Wenyuan said made sense. The Guanzhong torture room was indeed in an awkward position. Whether it was externally or internally, there were many risks. It was only because of Chu Kuanga and Guan Siyu that it managed to achieve its current status. In the original plot, the Guanzhong torture room had experienced several huge shocks. However, Chu Xiu didn't pay much attention to the details at that time, so he couldn't remember them now. Jiang Wenyuan said that the Guanzhong torture room wouldn't give Chu Xiu any preferential treatment or resources. This might be a disadvantage to others, but it was exactly what Chu Xiu wanted. Chu Xiu didn't need any preferential treatment at all. Back then, Chu Xiu chose the Guanzhong torture room because the Guanzhong torture room didn't care about one's background and could maintain absolute neutrality. Chapter 220. Jiang Wenyuan was right when he said that a fine bird chose a good tree to nest in. However, the problem was that Jiang Wenyuan was not a good tree. If Chu Xiu really chose to side with Jiang Wenyuan, he would be courting death. One could tell from Jiang Wenyuan's current behavior that he had been walking on the path of courting death without stopping. If Chu Xiu really sided with Jiang Wenyuan, he would probably end up in a miserable state. He would probably die even faster. Moreover, Chu Xiu also had his own ambitions. A fine bird chose a good tree to nest in. All along, Chu Xiu had not wanted to be a fine bird, but a divine tree that could attract countless fine birds. Therefore, after hearing Jiang Wenyuan's straightforward solicitation, Chu Xiu's expression turned solemn. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. I am ashamed to accept it. However, when I, Chu Xiu, was at my lowest point, it was the Guanzhong torture room that took me in. Although I, Chu Xiu, am not a good person, I know the principle of repaying kindness. Therefore, forgive me for not accepting Your Highness's solicitation." After speaking, Chu Xiu cupped his hands and turned to leave. Jiang Wenyuan looked at Chu Xiu's back as he left. He clenched his fists and said coldly, "I gave you face, but you don't want it." Chu Xiu's rejection reminded him of the time when he had personally tried to recruit Guan Siyu and been rejected by her. Although Chu Xiu's words were tactful and not as blunt as Guan Siyu's, the meaning revealed was the same. That was, "I don't like you." Eastern Qi was the strongest among the three countries. Eastern Qi occupied the most prosperous land in the world, the Central Plains. This country, this world, should belong to him. If not for the surnamed Lu who had usurped the throne of the Jiang family, if he represented the Eastern Qi royal family to recruit Chu Xiu, how could Chu Xiu refuse? How could he dare to refuse? Jiang Wenyuan's usually kind eyes were now filled with gloom. At the same time, he thought to himself that he would take back what belonged to him sooner or later. At that time, whether it was Guan Siyu or Chu Xiu, they would have to submit to Eastern Qi. Not the Lu family's Eastern Qi, but the Jiang family's. At this time, the people on the 7th floor of the Dragon Assembly Pavilion were also surprised to see Chu Xiu leaving. They did not know what was going on. The Dragon Assembling Pavilion was filled with arrays. Not only could it prevent warriors from fighting here, but it also had the effect of transmitting sound. Chu Xiu and Jiang Wenyuan sat in a corner. No one present could hear what they were saying. They only saw the two of them talking nicely just now. In the end, they turned hostile in an instant. What was going on? The Dragon Assembly Pavilion was full of arrays. Not only could they prevent warriors from fighting here, but they also had the effect of recording. Chu Xiu and Jiang Wenyuan were sitting in a corner. No one present could hear what they were saying. They only saw that the two of them were having a good conversation, but in the blink of an eye, they had fallen out. What was going on? Jiang Wenyuan was the memorial arch that the Lu royal family had set up. As a prince with a different surname, he had lived better than a portion of the orthodox Lu royal family. It was clearly not a wise move to offend Jiang Wenyuan in a place like Dongqi. On the first floor, Li Bu-san was still waiting. When he saw Chu Xiu come out, he quickly smiled and said, "Young master, why did you come out so quickly?" Chu Xiu looked up and said indifferently, "If I don't come out soon, I'm afraid I will be chased away. Let's go. Find me a comfortable inn. I want to stay." Li Bu-san was a little confused. Of course, if he knew that Chu Xiu had offended the powerful Jiang Wenyuan in Eastern Qi, he would probably be so scared that he would return the purple gold to Chu Xiu and never come to Chu Xiu again. At night, Jiang Wenyuan sat alone on the 9th floor of the Dragon Assembly Pavilion, drinking wine. At this time, the door of the 9th floor was pushed open. Mr. Lu, who had personally talked to Jiang Wenyuan during the day, pushed open the door and entered. Seeing Jiang Wenyuan's gloomy face, Mr. Lu smiled and said, "Prince, I heard that you failed to recruit Chu Xiu?" Jiang Wenyuan snorted coldly and said, "He is the same as Guan Siyu. He doesn't know what is good for him. Based on the foundation of the Guanzhong torture room, I want to see if Chu Xiu will regret it in the future." Mr. Lu shook his head and said, "Forget it. Prince, please calm down. He is just a junior martial artist. Every year, there are many young talents in the pugilistic world. However, there are not many who can make it to the end. By the way, Prince, how are the preparations on your side? The people from the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa have already arrived. We need to prepare everything before the God Weapon Conference begins." Jiang Wenyuan waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. I have been operating in Eastern Qi for so many years. Can I not even handle such a small matter?" Mr. Lu cupped his hands and said, "Then this one can rest assured. Although this is a small matter for your highness, it is a big matter for us. If this cooperation is successful, in the future, if your highness has something to ask of us, we can still cooperate." Jiang Wenyuan nodded and suddenly asked, "Actually, I don't understand why you are doing this. Dugu Weiwei has been dead for hundreds of years, and the Kunlun devil cult has long been destroyed. Look at the moon-worshipping cult in Miaojiang, and then look at the evil Pole sect in Northern Plains. These demonic sects that used to rely on the Kunlun devil cult are now living very comfortably. If you learn from them, you don't need to hide like you are now. You can only act in the dark." As soon as Jiang Wenyuan's words left his mouth, Mr. Lu's expression abruptly changed. His gaze became extremely gloomy, and the aura around him became incomparably furious. Strong wind swept out, and true energy roared. This Mr. Lu, who seemed extremely ordinary, was actually a great expert who was one with the world. "Shut up. As long as the sacred fire is not extinguished, the Devil Lord will not die. At the peak of West Kunlun, even if the bald donkeys of the Bodhi Zen monastery used the 6 paths of Buddha reincarnation formation to seal it, the rootless sacred fire was still burning. Who would dare say that the Devil Lord was dead? Even the sovereign list of wind-sweeping tower has a place for the Devil Lord. Ning Xuanji is known as an immortal, but he is also immortal. He alone can't kill the Devil Lord. Just as Mr. Lu's aura burst forth, several auras also burst forth from the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. Among them was the unity of heaven and man, as well as the 5 Qis unifications. Clearly, as soon as Mr. Lu made a move, they would immediately attack. Jiang Wenyuan was also shocked by Mr. Lu's reaction. He did not expect that his curious question would make Mr. Lu, who had always been extremely calm, so agitated. Seeing this, Jiang Wenyuan quickly said, "Mr. Lu, please don't take it to heart. I was just saying without thinking. I didn't mean to offend anyone or the Kunlun devil cult." At this time, Mr. Lu also retracted his aura and returned to his previous calm self. He cupped his hands at Jiang Wenyuan and said, "Forgive me, Your Highness. I was a little too agitated." Jiang Wenyuan chuckled and said, "It's fine. I was too rash just now." With that, Mr. Lu walked out of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. Only then did Jiang Wenyuan let out a long sigh of relief. He took out a handkerchief to wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. In terms of cultivation level, he was only at the innate stage. Although his status was there, strength was still strength. He still felt pressured when facing a unity of heaven and man expert who was truly enraged. At this time, Uncle Chi walked in from the side with a cup of ginseng tea. He placed the teacup on Jiang Wenyuan's table and said hesitantly, "Your Highness, these guys are related to the Kunlun devil cult of the past. They're not a good group. Isn't it a little bad for us to work with them and be so close to them?" Jiang Wenyuan picked up the ginseng tea and drank it in one gulp. He let out a long sigh and said, "If there were other people I would work with, I wouldn't want to work with them either. But now, who else can I work with? The Mo family of the Mirror Lake Manor?" On the first day that Mo Yezi returned to the Mirror Lake Manor from Jianghu, this king personally went to greet him, giving him enough face. In the end, that old fart refused to even refine a weapon for this king. He even said that this king was not worthy of the weapon he refined. Does he really think that this king cares about the weapon he refined? And that hidden sword villa, this prince found 3 of the weapons from the world's famous sword manuals, just so that the disciples of Hidden Sword Villa could become my swordsmanship instructors. In the end, Hidden Sword Villa only sent a few disciples with different surnames. Do they think this prince is an idiot? Even that young warrior, Chu Xiu, didn't give me face. At this point, Jiang Wenyuan's face was already cold. Whether it's in the court or in the Jianghu, these guys are very powerful. Under normal circumstances, it would be extremely difficult for me to work with them. I can only find another way. Uncle Chi, you've been with me for so many years. You should know what's going on with the Jiang family. I don't have any talent for cultivation. I was only able to reach the Xiantian realm because of the accumulation of elixirs. However, I don't have any talent for cultivation. My father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and all my children don't have any talent for cultivation. Don't tell me you can't figure out the reason. Jiang Wenyuan's face was already filled with malevolence. All these years, my Jiang family can't even cultivate our family's secret techniques. We can only watch as the Lu family cultivates our Jiang family's 9 Dragons Emperor Supreme technique. The Lu family wants my Jiang family to live happily for the rest of their lives. How could it be so easy? Uncle Chi, I can never forget what my father said to me before he died. Don't forget that my Jiang family is destined to be a royal family. In the past, when my Jiang family's founding emperor descended into this world, there was a thunderstorm. 9 dragons coiled in the void. After passing down the 9 Dragons Emperor Supreme technique, they flew into the sky. When the founding emperor came of age, he swept through the world and ended the war between the small countries in the Central Plains. Only then did the great Qi dynasty flourish. My Jiang family should be the ruler of this world. We are born to be a royal family. Uncle Qi knelt on one knee in front of Jiang Wenyuan and said, "If your highness hadn't helped me back then, this old man would already be a skeleton in a grave. This old man has no other requests in this life. I'm only willing to go through fire and water for your highness, even if I have to die 10,000 times." Following Uncle Qi's words, the surrounding people also chimed in, "We're willing to go through fire and water for your highness, even if we have to die 10,000 times. A silent smile appeared on Jiang Wenyuan's face. This was the reason why he, the king of peace and happiness, didn't have to continue living in peace. Chapter 221. What happened in the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion did not affect Chu Xiu's mood. Although he had offended Jiang Wenyuan, he was not worried that Jiang Wenyuan would do anything to him here. After all, Chu Xiu represented the Guanzhong torture room. If Jiang Wenyuan attacked him, it was equivalent to attacking the Guanzhong torture room. Furthermore, Jiang Wenyuan wouldn't touch Chu Xiu even if it was for his own sake. In front of outsiders, Jiang Wenyuan had always shown himself to be very forthright and magnanimous. Right now, others still didn't know that he had been rejected when he tried to recruit Chu Xiu. If he were to make a move on Chu Xiu at this time, wouldn't it be equivalent to confessing without being pressed and ruining his own reputation? Therefore, Chu Xiu continued to wander around the Ji State Prefecture for the past few days. At the same time, many people from the pugilistic world came to the Ji State Prefecture during this period of time. The entire Ji State Prefecture was in a mess, and it was almost impossible to contain them. Chu Xiu could not be bothered to squeeze with those people in the Ji Province Prefecture, so he went directly to the Water Cloud Temple next to the Mirror Lake outside the city. On one side of the Mirror Lake was the Mo family's Mirror Lake Villa, and on the other side was a small Taoist temple called the Water Cloud Temple. In the Mirror Lake, Chu Xiu sat on a small boat, looking at the scenery outside. There was a pot of yellow wine and a few side dishes on the bow. If it was not the wretched Li Busan beside him, but a gentle and affectionate beauty, this scene would probably be more poetic. At this time, there were many small boats on the Mirror Lake. Obviously, there were many warriors who thought that the Ji State Prefecture was too crowded, so they came here to relax. Anyway, it was not too far away from the God Weapon Convention of the Mirror Lake Villa. At this time, Li Busan was introducing the situation of the Water Cloud Temple to Chu Xiu. "Young master, in 2 hours, Daoist Xianxia of the Water Cloud Temple will be preaching. If you are interested, you can go and listen." Chu Xiu took a sip of the warm yellow wine and asked, "Is this Water Cloud Temple's Daoist Xianxia very strong?" Li Busan scratched his head and said hesitantly, "Daoist priest Xianxia? He doesn't seem to know any martial arts. At least, in all the years I've been in the Ji State Prefecture, I've never seen Daoist priest Xianxia fight with anyone. At most, I've seen him perform some Daoist Qi nurturing moves, but they're slow and powerless. Moreover, the scale of the Water Cloud Temple is also very small. There are only Daoist priest Xianxia and a few orphans that he took in when they were young. These orphans were raised by him to become little Daoist priests. After they came of age, they went to the Jianghu to preach and travel." When Chu Xiu heard this, a look of interest appeared in his eyes. He didn't believe that the Taoist priest of the Water Cloud Temple didn't know martial arts. One had to know that the Mirror Lake was a treasured land of feng shui. However, in this huge Mirror Lake, on one side was the Mirror Lake Manor's Mo clan, and on the other side was the Water Cloud Monastery. Wasn't this strange? It was normal for the Mo clan to be there. Although the Mo clan wasn't very strong, they had Mo Yezi, the the former pavilion master of the divine weapon pavilion and a great master of blacksmithing. Ordinary powers couldn't compare to them. Therefore, it was normal that other powers didn't dare to establish their power next to the mirror lake. Moreover, the water cloud temple looked very ordinary. There was only an old Daoist priest and a group of young Daoist priests. However, it was able to face the Mirror Lake Manor's Mo clan across the lake. If there was nothing fishy going on, Chu Xiu wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Li Bu-san continued, every time after lunch, Daoist priest Xiancheng would explain the Daoist scriptures to the young Daoist priests in front of the water cloud temple. Anyone who is interested can come and watch. The things that ordinary Daoist priests talked about were so profound that they gave me a headache just by looking at them. However, Daoist priest Xiancheng was able to use the simplest context to explain those things. Even a rough person like me could understand them. I don't know why, but every time I listen to Daoist priest Xiancheng talk about these things, I always feel like I've thought of something. It's very strange. Therefore, whenever I have time, I will come and listen to Daoist priest Xiancheng's teachings. There are also many martial artists in the Ji State Prefecture who come to listen to Daoist priest Xiancheng's teachings. Daoist priest Xiancheng doesn't hide anything. No matter how many people listen, he always says what he wants to say. After hearing Li Bu-san's description, Chu Xiu became interested in Daoist priest Xiancheng of the Water Cloud Temple. He wanted to see if this Daoist priest was a hidden expert. If this Daoist priest Xiancheng was really an expert, and Li Bu-san, who had known him for more than 10 years, could not detect his strength, then it proved that Daoist priest Xiancheng had successfully hidden himself from the world. At this moment, a luxurious passenger ship made a splash and sailed to the side of Chu Xiu's boat. A voice chuckled and said, "It seems that Brother Chu is in a good mood. I wonder how the style of our Eastern Qi is. Is it comparable to the style of Guanzhong?" A figure dressed in a golden brocade robe leaped down from the passenger ship, and an almost undetectable sound of Gang Qi rang out from beneath his feet. He was easily dragged onto Chu Xiu's small boat. Chu Xiu remembered this person in front of him. A few days ago, he was on the 7th floor of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. Judging from his status and the fact that he was surrounded by a crowd, he should not be of low status. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Guanzhong has experienced war and there is really nothing beautiful about the scenery. The so-called prosperity is only due to the trade caravans and martial artists coming and going from the 3 countries. In reality, there are not many locals in Guanzhong." After saying this, Chu Xiu cupped his hands at the young man and said, "May I know your name?" The young man smiled and said, "Not a problem. I am Mo Tianlin of the Mo family of Xiangyang." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Number 15 on the Longhu roll, ink-drunk sword Mo Tianlin?" The Mo family of Xiangyang of Eastern Qi was one of the 9 aristocratic families in the world. Although it was not at the top, it had not declined for 1,000 years and its strength had always been stable. Mo Tianlin shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "I did not think of this nickname myself. It is not something to be proud of." The nickname, Ink-Drunk Sword, did not refer to Mo Tianlin's martial arts or his weapon. Instead, it referred to the time when Mo Tianlin was young and frivolous. He hid his identity and pursued a prostitute but failed. In his drunken stupor, he danced with his sword and used it as a brush. He splashed ink and wrote a sad song that spread throughout the entire Eastern Qi. As a disciple of the Mo family of Xiangyang, one of the 9 aristocratic families, he pursued a prostitute but failed. As a disciple of a martial arts family, he wanted to make a name for himself in Eastern Qi with a song. This was really embarrassing. Mo Tianlin was beaten up by his father and locked in the ancestral hall for 2 years. But who would have thought that Mo Tianlin would suddenly become enlightened because of this incident? His cultivation improved rapidly and he went from the blood condensation stage to the physical invulnerability stage in 2 years. After he came out to roam the Jianghu, he showed extraordinary strength and climbed to the 15th place on the Longhu list within a year. But when Mo Tianlin became famous, someone revealed the frivolous things he did in his youth. As a result, Mo Tianlin's nickname became Ink-Drunk Sword. It sounded poetic, but in fact, it was the most humiliating moment for Mo Tianlin. Chu Xiu did not know about these past events. But if people around him who were familiar with his past also called him by this nickname, Mo Tianlin would turn hostile. Chu Xiu really did not know about the frivolous past of Mo Tianlin. He only remembered the names and backgrounds of the top 20 martial artists on the Longhu list, but he would not memorize all their detailed information. At this moment, Mo Tianlin smiled and said, "Brother Chu and Prince Anil seemed to have some conflict yesterday?" Today, he took the initiative to talk to Chu Xiu because he was overflowing with gossip and purely out of curiosity. It was fine that he did not see Chu Xiu. Coincidentally, he was also touring the lake, so he came to chat with Chu Xiu. He was also a little curious about Chu Xiu. Among the top 20 of the Longhu list, there were very few martial artists who were originally loose cultivators. It could be said that they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Although Chu Xiu was now the patrol inspector of the Guanzhong torture room, his background was that of a standard loose cultivator. Being able to reach this step, Mo Tianlin was also very curious. Chu Xiu shook his head. He did not spread the news of Jiang Wenyuan recruiting him to the city. He only said lightly, just some differences of opinion. I, Chu Xiu, was born in the wilderness, while Prince Anil was once a member of the royal family. Of course, we are not on the same page. Hearing that Chu Xiu did not want to say anything, Mo Tianlin did not force him. Instead, he said, "Actually, Prince Anil falling out with you could be your own bad luck, taking the blame for your hall master." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Hall Master Guan has a grudge with Prince Anil?" Mo Tianlin smiled and said, "My Mo family is the local tyrant of Eastern Qi. I have heard some news. It is said that when Hall Master Guan Siyu came to Eastern Qi to meet the royal family to discuss the status of the Guanzhong torture room, Prince Anil had contact with Hall Master Guan, but for some reason, they parted on bad terms." Chu Xiu's eyes immediately revealed a strange expression when he heard that. If he guessed correctly, Jiang Wenyuan should have tried to recruit Guan Siyu just like how he had done in the past. If this was the case, he didn't know how to evaluate Jiang Wenyuan anymore. This was simply ridiculous. At that time, it was more than 20 years ago. Guan Siyu had already taken over the position of the Guanzhong torture room's hall master. She was also a martial arts grand master of the real pellet state. She was definitely an overlord-level character. And what about Jiang Wenyuan at that time? Even with the identity of Prince Anil, he was just a junior. The newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger. He actually wanted to recruit Guan Siyu and the entire Guanzhong torture room. If it was Chu Xiu, he would probably turn hostile. Chu Xiu shook his head and smiled faintly, "Whether Prince Anil has a grudge with Hall Master Guan or with me, I will return to Guanzhong after the Divine Weapon Convention anyway. Why do I care so much? Speaking of which, the people who came to the Divine Weapon Convention this time are much fewer than I thought. I didn't even see the top 5 of the Longhu list." Mo Tianlin smiled and said, "In our opinion, a divine weapon is something that can only be encountered by chance. Even my Mo family's old ancestor doesn't have a divine weapon in his hands. But for the top 5 of the Longhu list, as long as they really grow up and step into the realm of martial arts Grand Master, the sect will naturally prepare a divine weapon for them. Why bother to come here to fight for a divine weapon that you don't even know what it is?" You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.